All right, shall we get started? This is Northampton Conservation Commission meeting for the 26th of February 2009. Making it a practice to state at the beginning of each meeting that the commission is a group of volunteer citizens that are chartered to enforce the provisions of the Wetlands Protection Act on the state level and the Wetlands Ordinance at the city level as our tools in order to protect the resources identified in the Wetlands Protection Act, which normally sit on a piece of paper up on the board here, but it isn't here today. But that's our charter, is to protect things like habitat, groundwater quality, and so forth. Through the tools of the city ordinance and the state Wetlands Protection Act, we do not have other jurisdictions other than as defined by those two pieces of legislation. First item up today, continuation of a notice of intent filed by Smith College for the relocation of a tennis court and creation of a synthetic playing field and the paving of an existing gravel parking lot. Work is proposed to take place in a riverfront area off of College Lane, if you have athletic fields at Smith College. Bruce, I understand they're wanting a continuation?
Yes, they're still working on their stormwater permit with the Department of Public Works. So,
To continue to March 12th at
Do they really set the 12?
5:30?
let's do it at 5:45.
At 5:45. No, second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. The next item is until, yep.
Should we do the minutes?
Ah, good point. Good point. Thank you. Everybody got a copy from Bruce. The minutes from February 12th. Can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes of February 12th.
Second?
Second.
Anybody got any changes or other discussion about the minutes?
Can I get a vote on the executive session?
Do we
Okay.
move them at the same time? It's the same date. You want a second?
There are two different sets of minutes. I think we have to approve them separately.
I just had on the second, no, it's the first page,
Yep.
under the 5:30 p.m. item for Mass Highway, just that it's the natural heritage and endangered species program.
Okay.
And I think it's Christine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Christine's name is Kristen. Looking at it.
Yeah, the other way, yeah. It should be
Yeah,
Christine.
it should be Christine rather than Kristen. Just pretty cool.
There was a spelling error, but I can't remember what it is. It's on the second page. It's not that you can't figure out what it is. I just can't remember which one. Anyway.
The spell check will find? Okay.
That's not very helpful.
With those minor amendments, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? So voted. And now we have,
Yeah. Move the executive session minutes of February 12th.
second?
Second.
Any discussion about those minutes? Any modifications, changes?
Well, other than a name, but that might be. She's already fixed it for the other.
Oh, other than Christian.
Yeah.
Christine.
No.
Nothing else? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.
Kevin?
Yes.
We have Mr. Harity here from the 225 Montauk Street project with
Which is,
a planting plan.
all right, which is not on the posted agenda, but we did get a copy of the plan.
That came out after the agenda had been posted, so I guess it would fall under other business if you, since the hearing is already closed and been approved, it's just a review of the planting plan. Or the application is approved and the hearing closed.
I guess the question is whether we'll do that while we have 10 minutes now, or we can't move on to the next item for 10 minutes. So, reason to discuss now. Everybody had a chance to look at it? Comments?
Would you like to see a copy of the plan?
Yeah, that'd be nice, like,
Oh,
did we have one sent to us?
Yes, you sent an electronic copy.
I mean, lost my computer trailer. I didn't even get the minutes.
I printed out the small thing.
Oh, this is the one I sent.
With us tonight is Ann Wellington from Wellington Landscape and Design, who designed the plan with the input from our last meeting. She incorporated those variables in there, and now let Ann take it from here.
The plan is two-pronged, both the first being to create a buffer to the resource area, and the second is to initiate a habitat introductions that will help to establish future species that are appropriate for natural restoration of the site. There's an open channel here, and this low area, low-lying area, and so the introduction includes native trees, large shade trees, red maples, American sycamore, and then some flowering understory trees on the upper elevations of that area, and the edge of flowering dogwoods. And then the buffer here is an introduction of plethora, which should be a very suitable plant both for the soil conditions and for behind this building. They sucker and become quite a nice, thick, dense shrubbery, which would have fragrant flowers, of course, in the summer, as well as be a food source for native habitat. In addition to that, want to overseed this whole area with grass, thatch it, expose some soil, and overseed it with a wetlands soil mix, which would help establish some of the native species of grasses. Don't recommend taking off the whole soil, lawn vegetation cover for, silting problems in the channel. But I think with establishing some, grass seeds will help to really create a rich resource here. This is going to change from a sunny area, lawn area, and over time into a wooded area. So it's going to change dramatically both plant species and mammals, birds, and such like that. So hopefully this would be a nice introduction for that.
And fence.
The fence, and then a physical barrier here of a fence. I believe there was some discussion about the suitability of a split rail fence. I know that we're doing projects where we're doing split rail with locust, and locust being a wood that is not rot anytime soon. Generally, sometimes they last 100 years, typically 50. UVA says that they last 25 years, whereas other species of woods will last 5 in the ground. So I think it's a very appropriate material to use, and we just put put it right into the ground, and should last quite a while.
What about the heights on the cluster? Are there two different heights?
Yes, we have 2 different heights of cluster. One is a hybrid, which would stay a little lower, so that in this area right behind the buildings, we don't feel quite as claustrophobic. We still have some good air movement, and then a little bit higher, the native species in behind. And I don't think, and I think that should be a good barrier over time. And they're, fairly quick to establish in that.
I know that most of the area was yard. Are any of these trees existing? Is this?
That's the
Is this
existing
one?
elm,
That's the
yes.
one,
There are no other species identified here.
yeah. I know that.
There is, we do recommend going in here and removing any invasives. That is part of the project, part of the recommendation. At the moment, it's hard to identify all the species in that site. I do believe there's a little, appears some multiflora rose or something like that. So invasives, not just non-natives, but any native invasives as well, should be removed so that they don't take over that site, especially those thorny briars.
So does the Ruggles Center have money to implement this plan? I mean, or
This would be, part of the site work for the whole plan.
it is?
Yeah.
So it's really your responsibility? Is that?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's part of this, that would be, part of the notice of intent.
That looks good.
I noticed in the pictures that you sent, you look like you're planning a 2-rail fence. As a kid, I grew up walking on every split rail fence I could find, and the top rail, as I got older and my friends got older, tended to break. And I wonder if a triple rail would be, because you break a 2-rail and you have something, the only remaining barrier is below knee height. And you break a 3-rail, you have something still close to waist height. So I feel more comfortable with a 3-rail than a 2-rail. I feel.
Just put a strand of barbed wire right across.
Yeah, but aren't those plants going to be kind of hard to get through anyway?
The plants in back, are going to be 3 feet right off the start. And then the ones in front are going to be, a foot or something.
Yeah, they're 18 inches as from the nursery.
And then in short time, we're going to have a barrier in the, that's going to go range from here to here in probably, 2 years.
Yeah, it shouldn't take long, few years, because of the good soil conditions here and the moisture, ample moisture in the soil, should grow very, very well, very quickly.
What's the height of the top rail on the fence? I can't see it.
Let me read it for you. 16 and 6.
It should be about 40 inches.
38. I don't know that.
I think it's fine, Kevin, if you're really consistent on it. You look at it 2 ways. If you put a third thing up there, then it's climbable and a small child gets higher up,
I
so,
understand.
Yeah, 2 rail doesn't bother me.
Balls, rakes, a bunch of Clifford branches.
I'll live with that.
And the flowering dogwoods they're facultative upland plants located in the wetland. Did you ever read?
They do grow on stream beds and grow all the way up to the areas where they're a little more upland. They definitely do not like it dry. That's the one thing that they don't like. They also don't like to be waterlogged in anaerobic soil, but this is not that situation. This should be appropriate for them.
Okay.
The USDA suggests planting them as species in a reintroduction area.
Okay. I haven't ever seen them in wetlands per se. I have seen them along banks, but never in wetlands, and that area does get pretty wet. I've been out there in the spring and fall when it's slushy and, I mean, I won't say ankle deep, but I will say my feet were wet, so.
If you felt that that would be a species, I believe they would work. I've been specifying plants for 25 years, including the National Parks Service. I'm part of a team that was just selected in the last month to work on national park projects. So I believe they would work. If you don't feel that they would work, you could substitute with an Amelanchier or something that might be more suitable.
I guess my recommendation would be that you're the professional, but
She's got them in the upland.
no, that's in the wetland. That's wetland.
No, I know, but it's in the,
It's
it's in the high.
It is
It's the
there.
high end of a
It is
wetland,
the
it's
higher.
still a wetland, Paul. I mean,
No, I know, but I'm just saying it's going to be.
yeah, my recommendation would be that it be conditioned that if any plants die, and then they have to be replaced at the same size, and
That's fine.
And
so,
for-
Sure.
for how
again, I
long-
trust that
For
you're,
how long a period of time are you saying?
I don't know, does anyone have, you have a recommendation for that?
Well, typically in the nursery trade or in landscape trade, 2 years is the outside.
Okay.
They fail in 2 years.
Yeah, we usually do 3 years for wetland restorations. We
do 3.
require,
Okay.
but
2 growing seasons,
2 growing seasons, which ends up being
3 years.
3 years, basically.
Depending on when they plant.
Are these resistant to anthracnose blight? Because I grew
Yes.
up with dogwoods
Yes.
and they're all gone.
This is the story on that. For the past 20 years, there have been issues with anthracnose blight being problematic. It is now in a phase where it's remissive. The industry and horticulturists are now beginning to replant and propagate dogwoods for planting. They believe that because of global warming and the changes in the climate, that issue has sort of run its course. And that's another reason why I selected this plant, is because I'd like to see that species reintroduced.
It's a beautiful species,
Right.
but I thought the Cornus japonica and Calusa had been the replacements because
Right,
they
that's right.
didn't survive.
That's right.
Especially in this where it'll be
They wouldn't.
it'll be a shadier spot with
That's
this.
right. And what I could see from these is also they would start to naturalize along those lower edges of that ridge.
The growth habit is perfect for this site, I think. It's a compact tree that doesn't get to great height,
Right.
so.
Right.
But I agree, you said anaerobic, when we were out there in the winter, not even the wettest time of year, we were, right, when you took the shovel down, it was 8 to 12 inches down at the highest point. So
Was that this year?
That was this year.
Yeah, I think this year was exceptional, as we all know, maybe, perhaps, in terms of water.
No. We were there just after the first snow, so I don't think.
Well,
It's just something to consider. I mean, it's like I can.
If you have a two-year window, it's fine. I mean, they'll know.
and then we could replace them with another species if that's the. Yeah. In 2 years of it.
All right, do we need a motion to approve? What do we do to wrap up because this was already approved except for the
But I
plan?
think we have to approve it.
We have to
because
officially
our
approve
rule
this
was.
plan.
Motion to approve the planting plan?
Yeah.
Yes.
With a stipulation for,
Right.
Stipulation
I don't know if
for
that's in
2 years on the dog,
On the
on the
dogwood.
there.
plantings?
Just on a planting.
All right.
2 growing seasons.
Two growing
Season
seasons.
3
Two
years.
growing seasons on the dogwood.
I just had one issue on the fence, which is that naturally the fence may last for 25 years, but a bad actor could take it down with a chainsaw or even a handsaw in about 20 minutes. So do we want to include any kind of stipulation that the fence be replaced if damaged or
Well,
removed?
I thought we had in the initial that the fence had to be maintained as part of the condition of the association.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a provision to go into the covenants?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Any further discussion, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sam, appreciate it.
I just use a lot of products.
Next item, notice of intent filed by Nitsch Engineering on behalf of Massachusetts State Police for the installation of bollards, lights, and a conduit along the perimeter of existing paved areas. The work is proposed to take place in Riverfront Area and a 100-foot buffer zone for bordering vegetated wetlands. We have somebody representing.
I'm Karen Brzezinski. I'm with AECom Architects. We're architects engineers in Boston. This is Chelsea Christensen. She's with Nitsch Engineering. Our client is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And the project is bigger than what you see here, but just for background, we're doing work at 6 Massachusetts State police stations, and the gist of the work is security upgrades and accessibility into the building. So for accessibility, we're putting in ramps to get people to be able to get into these buildings. And the security is basically some cameras, some lighting, some bollards in cases. I think we have bollards on this one to prevent cars from driving into the buildings. And Chelsea's going to present the plan.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Christensen from Nitsch Engineering. We have the roof charts.
Thanks.
I have with me response to the comments that the DEP sent out in a letter. There was one correction. You mentioned that this is in the buffer zone of the BVW. There actually is not a BVW on this on Halfway Brook, as the wetland scientist explained the attached note. As Karen mentioned, the project is mostly security upgrades and ADA accessibility upgrades. This line here represents the limit of all the work near the inside the riverfront area. This is outside the riverfront area, but it's the only work in the riverfront area is installing conduit and light poles along this line and installing bollards along this line. And then we're adding a handicap parking space and a pedestrian ramp outside the riverfront area and installing a dry well to take care of the additional water volume from that pavement.
Can you describe the lights? What are they talking about?
They're talking, it is pole lights, the cutoff light.
How
Because-
tall, how big, how bright?
I didn't bring a catalog cut of them. I think that they're typical light poles. Whatever height.
Oh,
I can see it.
25 feet.
In a supermarket parking lot or
No
something?
parking lot. They're that type of light pole. I don't have the exact catalog cut of the
Yeah.
picture, which I can send to you, but it is cutoff lighting, meaning that we're cognizant of the fact that there are neighbors in the area, so the way that they're projecting and the way that they light the area is towards the site. Because what we're mainly trying to do here is just allow this parking lot to be lit, so when the state police go back there to get in their cars, or sometimes they have vehicles that they, what do we call it? That they, yeah, sorry. That they just want to make sure that they can see what's back there. But I can get a catalog cut of that. Send it in.
The city does have a lighting ordinance, so I don't know if you need exempt from that or not, but it'd be worth contacting the senior planner and asking about, because they have a list of lights that are preferred.
Okay.
Maybe on the list already, but.
So the senior planner at the city, at the planning department?
Yes, her
Okay.
name's Carolyn Nitsch,
Okay,
M-I-S-C-H.
yeah,
It's 587-1287.
587,
1287.
thanks.
Any other questions from commission members? Bruce, any questions or comments?
No, it's pretty straightforward, simple project. DEP did have a couple questions about the riverfront delineation, and this area has been delineated multiple times over, even since I've been here, and it's basically at the bottom of a ravine, so I'm not worried about it. It looks accurate, it looks what the other plans that we've seen, it's similar or the same, and yeah, could be delineated in your car off of 91, basically.
Yeah.
I'll drive
Okay.
by.
So just general conditions?
More comments from the board?
Oh, any public comments?
Move to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Move to issue order of conditions with general conditions 1 through 32.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion or comments?
Bruce, they're gonna have to talk to, they're gonna have to make sure the lights work.
Do they have some plan?
I'm not sure, I'm not with us.
Yeah.
But,
I know it's not with us, but eventually.
I'm not sure how it works with zoning, if a state organization is exempt from the lighting standards. But
They
it can't,
are,
they probably are, but it would, it's always nice to go with what your neighbors are using, so. And
We'll look
typically
into it
what,
and try to use preferred lighting. It is for security, so they do have some limits, but.
I just see lights as being
Well, they're intrusive for
intrusive for wildlife. That's
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's not, that's why I'm asking, even though we don't really have anything.
Our lighting
Any
consultant might be
teeth for
able
all
to
this?
make sure they aim away from the riverfront.
And also it's intrusive for the sky. It's
yeah, one of the large issues is having lights that are covered on the top and aim in one
Right.
direction, so that light
It is
isn't
cut
going
off,
into
right.
the sky.
That's right.
Yeah.
The
So,
cutoff light is.
yeah,
But
cutoff
you're
light is-
essentially right on the edge, and so a light is.
I think most of the wildlife's gonna be in cuffs.
Anyway, that's the only reason I'm asking.
Yeah, and you
Are
probably
you
don't.
suggesting we put this in?
No, we can't. We don't really have.
No,
I'm
it's worth looking into.
Just asking.
One
Well, you
Just
can-
curious to see if they, what they say.
Yeah,
I don't think it's totally outside of jurisdiction, because if it affects the wildlife within the riverfront area, then that's, right, that's.
Well, I can't know that for sure.
No, I know, but I'm saying, I wouldn't wanna say,
Probably
oh, we
would. I mean,
never regulated.
It's light.
no, because we have regulated it in past projects where.
Right.
Considering like light pollution is an intrusion into habitat?
Yes.
That's the basis?
Yeah. And actually, at one point affecting, well, yes.
Local
affecting-
migration.
Yeah.
So,
So, vernal pool population, so forth.
But do we want to make an additional condition in this case?
I don't think so. It's the rear of this property is along Route 91. The front of it's along Route 5 and 10. There is a small patch of woods next to it that's, I believe, owned by the cemetery. And one day is not going to be a patch of woods. So I don't think it's much of a habitat area. I think it's actually a pretty good location for state police stations.
Bottom of the ravine is probably more
Right.
critical habitat, if there is a critical habitat.
Right.
And I don't think that's gonna be affected by the lighting.
Any other comments or discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted.
Jason,
Use the Wi-Fi.
Once this is over, I know I
Just looking out for.
can't wait by
My name is Downey. Townsend.
but the telephone is slow, but it makes not a lot.
A baseball coach called me Donnie, D-O-N-N-I-E Meyer for 2 years. I just gave up. For you, I'm Donnie Meyer.
Are you Dan?
No, Brian Windmill.
You are Brian?
Yeah.
Brian. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Mr. Donald, engineer.
He may have, that's what's in there.
What is it?
I
I didn't actually see that bylaw that you
I
guys
would
proposed. Is it done?
highlighted.
No,
Okay.
no.
Mine is, yeah. And this is just turn out?
Adam did mention something like that. I haven't seen it.
Because the plane grabs are not reasonable. They don't look too good either. I know. It always picks the most bizarre image. Someday I'll be able to control it better. Oh no. I didn't hear any snoring.
Yeah, you would. My secretary does sometimes. She comes and closes the door and it's like, so I know.
Okay, shall we move on? Next up, continuation of a notice of intent filed by Tofino Associates in Northern Avenue Homes for the construction of 25 dwelling units and associated roadways, parking areas, driveways, sidewalks, utilities, landscaping, and stormwater management system. Project is proposed to take place in the 100-foot buffer zone of bordering vegetated wetlands.
Doug Cole was just here, but
He's busy chatting with.
It's just stepped out.
You're late.
You're gonna hold it up?
No, just read the agenda item, and we have 4 members that can vote on this, right? Other members have been here for less than a complete series of discussions, but there are 4. Okay, applicant, want to present what's new and different and changed?
Sure. You're gonna try to hold it up?
yeah.
You want me to point it?
I didn't know if you, are you gonna point to it from where you're sitting?
I think you can do
Okay.
most of the pointing and I'll
Just do, want me to do a,
do some talking and then let Mark get up and,
want me to just do a quick review then?
I don't know, we doing a stand or no? We did a stand. Is that the whole thing?
Thing behind him worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that clip? It's just slide it in. Slide it in.
So basically,
Who clips this side?
Pinch it in there, slide it. I need some hands, I guess.
Duct tape.
Which red?
I have some tape in the truck if it's needed.
no, I think we're gonna use 2 human beings.
Back to the old days. Just to give a quick overview of the revised site plan. This plan shows a total of 23 units. It's a reduction of 2 from the original proposal. The units themselves are laid out, they're shown in these brown blocks, but in this kind of horseshoe pattern with the duplex still remaining up at the end of Northern Avenue. All work, excuse me?
Go ahead.
All work has been pulled outside of the 35-foot line to the wetlands, which is this inner red line, except for native species plantings as a buffer. And Doug was offering to, if it's allowed, to have those dug by hand, I should say. So there wouldn't be any equipment in there digging the area. The roads, what happened here is the road system came in, and it used to come in and basically tee over here, but in deleting this duplex building that used to be here, it allowed for the road to come in at a diagonal, and then these units could be pulled to mirror the roadway and therefore be pulled away from the wetland. The rain garden that used to be in this area, in the existing lawn, has been removed because we couldn't fit it in, but we can handle the stormwater by structural means. We did state that we prefer to do it in the original fashion, which was more quote-unquote green and following LID principles, but the stormwater can still be handled in that way. We do have a small rain garden here, which is essentially taking the runoff from the roadway, this stretch of roadway, going into the rain garden. The remainder of the stormwater is basically being captured and funneled through other site features, infiltration, storm water treatment chambers, and ending up in the larger detention basin here for this part of the site. So that has remained pretty much unchanged. But the overall layout of the buildings has changed, I'm going to say drastically from the original. And this arrangement also allowed us to create pockets of green space, more common green space on the site, mainly being here, here, and then obviously over here in this triangular piece. So that's a general overview of the change.
Yeah, I did want to say a few specific things. First of all, the green line that's shown on there is the 35-foot buffer zone line rather than the wetland line. There is a very small, slight change between the wetland and the upland, which you can see. So graphically, it's a little bit confusing.
Are you talking about this?
Yeah, that's not the wetland. In other words, that's the 35-foot line.
Yeah, the wetland is
The
back here.
wetland is down in there at that light sort of green edge there. We've gotten, one of the goals was to pull the units as much as we reasonably could away from the wetlands. There are now only 3 units that have a portion of their space within the 50-foot zone. So the 2 are on Northern Ave, and then one of the 2 right at the left end of the rest of the project. The rest are 50 feet or more from the wetland. There are still dry walls behind each block of units to infiltrate the roof runoff. The rain garden, as Mike mentioned, there is 1 remaining. 1 was removed because it was within the 10 to 35-foot zone. In the lawn area, because we are now aware that you don't want that area to remain as lawn, you want to see it revegetated, we basically infilled the area within 35 feet of the wetland with plantings with high wildlife habitat value. And one other thing that we're going to be proposing, which we have something with us, is that we're trying to deal with this issue where you've asked for large rocks, and you haven't asked for it yet, but Brian has suggested that we place these large rocks along the edge of the 35-foot zone. And in order to relieve the commission of the responsibility, and Brian specifically, Bruce, of responsibility for inspecting and enforcing the integrity of the no disturb zone, we were proposing that the condominium association be required to hire a professional on an annual basis, somebody approved by the commission, to go out and do a formal inspection of the buffer zone and to write a report and deliver it to you, so that there is a proactive system set up in place where somebody is required to do that on an annual basis. And there would be an account of money set up that would be accessible by the commission if they felt that the association wasn't doing its job in terms of enforcing the buffer zone, going in and taking action at the expense of the conduit association. So we have a draft of that at the moment, but that's basically in pretty preliminary form at this point. We'll have something that's more finalized in the next meeting. And that was about it. I don't know. Do you have, Mike, do you have the map of the stormwater
Yeah, do you
system as
want
well?
to go over that, or?
I think it's worth going through, just it's graphically it's clear.
It's just under here. Just in summary, these brown outlined blocks are the buildings again, and we have rain garden feature and the detention basin feature. These orange blocks are dry wells or infiltration trenches. These that are behind the units are designed as shallow systems to catch roof runoff and infiltrate. This one, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, we are piping runoff from a portion of the road through it to take advantage of the infiltration capacity of the soils, which in this corner of the site, which are the best soils for infiltration. And then overflow from the system goes through a pipe system, and then it'll go through this kind of the stormwater treatment chamber, which is located here, and then run down via pipe system behind these units and then into the detention basin. We have added additional storage in a underground detention basin, which consists of basically just drainage pipe. And what will happen is the water will enter this detention basin. If it gets to a level, it'll just basically back up into this and exit through the detention basin. And it's obviously it's all designed so that the overflows work and they don't flood out these units, etc. So that's just a basic rundown. There's also small dry well systems here. We're calling them dry wells. When I say dry well, people typically think of a structure, but these are actually perforated pipe in a gravel trench system. We had to design them as a shallow system so that we could take advantage of keeping them as far above groundwater as possible. That's basically the drainage in a nutshell. I'd like to just also stress that we've said this, stated this before, but the drainage system does meet the DEP standards. It complies with all their requirements for flows, treatment, infiltration to the maximum extent practicable. Questions from the commission?
Start with Bruce. Bruce, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I'll wait for the commission discusses it.
Commissioners, question of the applicant? Comments? Mr. Cole, I asked last time you were here, expressed concerns about the density of the project, but it occurred to me I did not ask if you were aware of how the density of your project compares with the existing density of the neighborhood in terms of roofed or paved area.
Funny you should mention it. We don't know about the roofed or paved area. We do know about the unit density. And we have some numbers on that, which we could share with you that are a little, they need to be, we need to finalize them, and we were thinking that mostly for planning board. But we don't know about the impervious surface area per se. Because I don't think there's any way we can get that access to that information. The amount of
SGIS does have an impervious surface layer, but it's not completely accurate. Could work off of that, I don't know.
You can give it a shot, but we don't have an answer right now. What we do know is that the unit density is either better than or comparable most of the surrounding neighborhood. And we can give you the specifics on it, right? Or you have it with you? Okay.
Unit density defined as
Well, we divided, this is what I've got. We basically divided the neighborhood up into various segments. There is the project. We averaged Elizabeth Street, Orchard Street, Northern Ave, Woodbine. We did calculations on all of those. The only place where our density was, our density was more dense was on Northern Ave, where there's 7,357 square feet of area per unit on Northern Ave, and we have 6,389 square feet of area per unit if you discount the wetlands entirely. If you keep the wetlands out of the picture, you're just calculating off of upland area. If you calculate the wetland area, then we have 9,700 square feet. But the other areas, for example, Orchard Street, 3,978 square feet per unit. Elizabeth Street, 3,327. Woodbine, 4,587. So it's in the same.
That's square footage per structure?
Per unit of dwelling unit.
Dwelling unit.
Right. So that's what we base the calculation on.
Okay.
We don't have an impervious area calculation.
Thank you.
One thing that we were able to do was, again, to create some green space that was not a part of anybody's yard, that was outside of the 35-foot buffer zone.
Mason?
Did the stormwater management calculations change at all with the change in the plan?
Again, each one of these changes, we always make sure that the calculations are correct, and when all situations, our pre and post flows are better than, our post flows are a little better than existing, and we are actually a little conservative because we are negating the stormwater effects of the dry wells.
Mm-hmm.
We know they make an impact on the stormwater, but we have ignored those so conservatively. So yes, we are complying, and the post flow conditions are less than the existing flow conditions.
Specifically, I was asking about stormwater management though, which is, as you know, a whole other ball game
Right, we
attached
looked
to
at,
the
I say
wetlands.
stormwater management is 3 areas. One is water quality, one is recharge, and one is stormwater attenuation. Now, the water quality we have addressed through all the BMPs that are acceptable by DEP. We have the rain garden, we have deep sump catch basins, and we have a proprietary system in there, which all, we exceed the 80% minimum requirement. The stormwater attenuation, just mentioned, the detention basin is sized accordingly, that we meet all the numbers, but the real numbers are actually better than what we're showing. And then as far as the recharge, again, we have the dry well for each one of the roofs. We have the recharge area back in the green space back here. And this is, because we are type C soils, we do it to the maximum extent practicable. So we are meeting the requirement in that regard.
With the removal of the rain garden though, it didn't...
The rain garden, again, for DEP purposes, you don't get credit, they don't give you dual credit. The rain garden give you water quality treatment.
Right.
So by eliminating one rain garden, we had to substitute the proprietary system in lieu of the rain garden.
Any other questions from the commission?
Is it appropriate to bring up the difference in inverts, the close, or should we leave that?
You need to further discuss the details of the stormwater management system. I guess in staff report, I wrote that I recommend continuing no matter what happens tonight, so that the applicant could work with DPW to, because luckily we have a DPW storm manager who now takes care of the stormwater part of this process, and then gives us a recommendation basically that says, yes, he issued a permit, or he did not, for the city side of this. And he says, yes, it meets DEP standards, and yes, it meets EPA standards. And so I was kind of hoping that we would, if no matter what happens tonight, continue, get DEP's sign off on it. Once we get that, bring it back to the commission, and the commission can further scrutinize the stormwater system. or accepted, I guess.
Mhm.
So,
All right, I just was looking at the detention basin invert. It's 8 inches above the, I don't know, the contour. It didn't seem, it just seemed not very much difference.
I have to look at the exact numbers. Is it shown on the plan here?
I mean, it's not much above ground, Paul?
Meaning,
Well, it's just 88. This is, the invert is 88 feet.
Sounds wrong.
Spillway for the riprap, correct?
that house is at 88.7.
Yeah.
Which is some incorporated values between 88 and 89.
Right, so it's be 8 inches. I'm not saying it's lower. I'm just saying, I just was looking at I guess what I'm asking is if it's far enough above, that you wouldn't get flooding coming in
well,
this way.
well, I guess maybe one of the concerns is, does the wetland rise high enough so that water can back
go
into
the other
the
direction.
Well, what's, if the
outlet?
wetlands flooded, what would it do for our
Yeah,
site?
because you only have 8 inches of.
Well, again, that's the elevation of the wetland flag, that's not the elevation of the standing water. I'm assuming
Oh,
that's.
I know,
yeah.
I know, I just didn't know.
We don't have a
That's true.
flood
I just-
elevation of the wetlands, you know,
Right,
we use the
right.
word wetlands, but there's Nitsch stream back there, but I don't believe there's history
Of it flooding going to that.
And the flooding 35 feet back.
No, I know, I just didn't know if, okay, I just was asking if it was far enough. So, yeah.
So I just had, last time we were here, we talked about maintenance access to the detention basin. And there was an area along the south perimeter of the site. And now with the movement of those units, I was just wondering,
Going
yeah,
this way.
yeah, how would access be?
We can still get access through that strip, or
Okay.
it can be done along here, and down primarily the walk to access that. There's gonna have to be access to this underground. We have clean outs in there as well as an observation cover that, you know, it needs to be inspected annually.
And there's no requirement to have heavy equipment, the biggest equipment you have would possibly be bobcat.
Right.
We don't typically bulldozers back there once a year.
That was actually my next question, was the maintenance of the underground overflow. Assuming that there's no salt used for road clearance and that there's quite a bit of sand, I was wondering about the performance of that system with overflows of sand, and also just to add the question in, also of the infiltration trench that's in the top corner there. What kind of maintenance, if you're inspecting it every year, is that because they have high failure rates with sediment, or?
Actually, we typically recommend once or twice a year cleaning of structures such as catch basins. A lot of towns do it 4 times a year. I think, you know, but what we have seen is that that's pretty much even once a year sometimes, and twice a year is adequate to maintain the system, to clean it out of the sediments that accumulate in the sun. This infiltration trench has water that's entering it is coming through a deep sump catch basin, which has pretty large capacity for sediment. Of course, some might migrate through there, but there's a lot of structures along the way that will also help to filter that out. Additional drain manholes, the storm scepter down here. I guess Mark can maybe talk a little bit more about the functioning and performance of these underground systems, but they're pretty much, unless you get some big, huge rush of sediment through there, my experience is they don't clog easily. They function for a long duration.
Just that, again, sometimes if you're using those underground systems for your major stormwater storage or attenuation, this is a recharge. This is to satisfy recharge requirements. So it's essentially supposed to take the essentially first flush and recharge. Your recharge occurs not on your 10-year storm, a 100-year storm, but on your everyday rainstorm. So that's really designed, every light bit of rain, it goes in there and gives us an opportunity to go back in the ground and recharge. It's not a huge underground storage tank, and it is preceded by catch basins, which will trap a large sediment. We don't have a lot of road sediment going to that. There's not a huge area that will go there. And again, all those other ones are just taking clean waters off the roof. Again, it's to encourage recharge. We're not really relying upon them for stormwater attenuation.
And then just I think, was your other question about this underground section?
Yeah, just how frequent maintenance would be needed, and since obviously if that, I don't know, what's the cubic foot storage of that area? It didn't seem
It wasn't
very
huge.
large.
Again, what it is, we needed some more room for the detention basin, so we essentially, you can put the whole detention basin system underground if you wanted to. And we put part of the system underground so that those are pipes essentially which will fill up full of water when the detention basin is full, and then as the detention basin drops back down, they'll discharge. And we have cleanouts on the far right-hand side, so if they ever did get sediment, there's not a real large reason for sediment to rush in there. It's a real quiescent scenario. But if they do ever did fill up, we have cleanouts on the far end. You could essentially take a hose and wash it and jet it back out. So we don't expect a lot of sediment to be in there, and if it is in there, it's easy to clean up.
And I'd just like to mention that that system is made up of, we're proposing 36-inch diameter pipes.
Yeah.
So they're pretty large, they're very easy to inspect and clean out if you need to.
And was the logic of not simply extending the detention basin to provide for the common space?
So we need some space for the
Yeah, we toyed with actually several ideas on how to get the storage, but we're going to take advantage of that underground, and we want to maintain the open space. Kind of area for people to use for kids to play.
The next question I had was about the heavier plantings in what was formerly the rain garden, and I guess invasives removal. So I don't know where you are with invasives removal at this point.
We essentially bagged it based on not getting a clear read from the commission as to whether or not that was an important function that you desire. We would certainly be willing to reconsider that if that was something that met with your general support.
Are you thinking about the whole area or just the edge? Or just
Yeah,
the upland?
There were two. There was an upland section, which was the knotweed, and then there was a wetland section that was the multifloral rose.
Right, to refresh your memory, the knotweed was pretty much stopped right at that wetland line.
Right.
And that was on the table, and as well as the multiflora, which was actually in the wetlands area here. And at this point, the applicant has chosen to eliminate all work in the wetlands.
I guess having heard conflicting testimony on whether or not removing invasives would have a beneficial impact in improving the resource area, or by disturbing the resource area and not being effective, actually cause harm, I would wonder if you could provide us with an opinion, not yourself, but whether you could have a wetland scientist.
You want to know? I can tell you what I've heard. I mean,
Yeah.
you're certainly at least as familiar in this field as I am. I've heard that conservation people who do this kind of work, generally use the herbicides in question to do this kind of work, and that there is no alternative. Corey, do you want to speak to that particularly, or?
Well, the advantages of getting rid of the knotweed would be that it doesn't actually provide any habitat value or food value for wildlife. It's just taking up valuable space for something that could actually be worthwhile for a local species. The disadvantage is that it's hard to get rid of. You have to have a licensed applicator do it. You have to cut the stalks, you have to drip the pesticide in. It generally takes a few years, and there's no guarantee other than providing dense shade that it's not going to come back. Regarding the multiflora rose, if you keep cutting it down, it won't come back. I mean, you can probably get rid of that without using herbicides, but you just have to constantly then go into the wetlands. So that would be a call of the Conservation Commission. Do you want people going in with clippers and weed whackers, twice a year getting rid of multiflora rose? Or you can send in goats, which do a great job of it. And the advantage of multiflora rose is it does provide a certain amount of habitat cover. I think that wildlife does eat the berries, and it's really beautiful and smells nice. And of course the disadvantage is that it's really going to keep spreading, and it'll displace other things. So if you want a variety of, things in the wetland, as opposed to just multiflora rose, you might want to remove it. But the real question is the knotweed and what you do about that and what you want to do. I think that a combination of herbicide, especially because it's dripped right into the stems, and plantings of plants that are going to provide dense shade would probably keep it under control.
I can also tell you that the neighbor's opinion on this subject seemed to be not to do it, and therefore I tended to shy away from doing it. It's kind of why I came to the conclusion that I did. Your feedback, their feedback. I'm sure there are professionals who know how to deal with this and give you an opinion, but I don't know what the answer to that would be.
And the knotweed won't spread into the wetlands, so if that's one of the concerns, it'll stay in uplands because it just doesn't, it won't grow in water. You can see it right on the edge of the wetland.
Right.
And it also won't grow where like a lawn is mowed either. So really what you're talking about is just that wetland edge to 35-foot buffer where you're going to have, a lawn for open space.
But we weren't going to mow that portion of the lawn after the fact.
Right.
No, just between the 10 and 35 where we're not going to mow is where you have to worry about the knotweed. Outside the 35 where there is going to be mowing, you don't have to worry about it. It's really a judgment call for the commission because it's your jurisdiction.
Other questions from the commission? Comments or questions from the public?
Well, Paul had something to say.
Not really.
No.
No, I was thinking about, I don't know, I don't have anything about invasives.
Can I say something, Yes. About the knotweed, which is the potential danger of the Japanese knotweed, that it spreads along that wetland buffer and then to the stream. And then what I've seen is people come along in their backyards and they weed whack it, and then it splits it into 1,000 pieces, and then the pieces go in the stream. They go downstream a little and they stick into the bank and then they grow. And it happens at the next house down and the next house down. You see them along every river in Northampton and in the entire valley. It's just, it seems to me that anytime, in my opinion, anytime you have a chance to get rid of invasives, then, and you have an opportunity to get rid of them, then you should. Whatever the method that is sensitive to the environment that would work.
As long as the commission is willing to oversee it for a couple of years. Because it's going to take more than a couple, probably 3 or 4. And they're planting large trees so that potentially it could be shaded out once the trees got past the height of the knotweed, potentially.
There are actually blue spruce right in front of it.
Right, in that area, there's a row of, not blue spruce, but Norway spruce. And they haven't crept in front of the row, but I think that's mainly due to maybe mowing practices on the lawn. But that space in front of the blue spruce and the limit of this work is proposed to be planted up with large trees and native shrubs. So really, we're still looking at it creeping along behind that row of blue spruce if nothing is done to it at all.
And is there also a large knotweed population up of Northern Avenue?
From what I could see, it seemed like it was basically right there.
Yeah.
Basically centered in that space.
Just in that one space?
Yeah, it hasn't
So that'll be
gone
taken
down
out
that
of there?
embankment or anything. it seems to be primarily right up on that little rise.
Okay,
Well, we could put it in the conditions, try it. We could try it here too.
I just have a plan question. What the heck is this line?
Oh, there are 2 parcels of land. It's actually, this line goes out that way. That's the line. That is a topo line.
No,
That's a property line.
The little hat.
but there's
hatch-
That's the edge of the
hatch
Oh,
line
lawn
here.
line, maybe?
Yeah, there is an edge of lawn line in there which also be.
There's different thicknesses here. Maybe it's tall grass and short grass, I don't know. It wasn't identified and I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a couple labels along that line, but it was actually survey located the edge of the lawn, and then that clearing line, which is to the south, I believe they're located by, those are where trunks of trees are.
Okay.
So there are branches that overhang that, but that area is generally in the center there is devoid of any large trees.
What do you think about asking Mr. Cole to include a invasive removal plan, give him some delineation, some area to work on?
I'm surprised that wasn't requested by DEP. Remember, that's a standard one of their comments. Is to remove invasives. Especially if you're going to do any kind of plantings near the wetlands. They're already going to be there.
I know, but this would be,
You really have to be careful with knotweed though. If you go in there with a weed whacker, or if you hit it with a lawnmower, even.
right, it just spreads.
Every little piece can start another plant. But,
I guess if I were getting a gut reaction right now, I'd like to,
stems.
my gut is to confine it to the upland areas. It's just, work in the wetlands is something that at this point we're avoiding otherwise, and if I'm gonna avoid it, I'd rather avoid it. But there's plenty of, there is multiflora rows on the high ground on the site in a variety of places, I think.
Yeah, not
And
as dense
there's-
as that one spot.
Yeah, not as dense as the one spot, and then, and there's the knotweed as well.
but you're right, that responds well to constant mowing. Eventually, the multiflora rose just runs out of energy. If you keep mowing. There's no oriental bittersweet out there.
There
is,
is, actually, it's
there is.
mostly along the right of way over there.
Yeah.
It's up in the trees.
That's it's even worse than knotweed.
There are quite a few. I can't name them all, but who looked at this parcel? Or what, well, I think when Chuck Dowchi is the one who delineated the wetlands, but he can verify a lot of the invasives that are existing out there.
Well, I guess some of the concerns that have been addressed in the commission about use of herbicides, many of them have been based on the effects of the surfactants used with glyphosate. But in this protocol, it would be a formulation that would be without surfactant if it's direct injection or being dripped into the stems. Which, again, if there's an opportunity to harness your resources to get rid of this, I wouldn't want to miss it. Having just sitting on the Community Preservation Committee, making a grant to the Broadway Coalition to do invasives removal, it would seem, I don't know, to miss an opportunity to do it here, where it is a fairly confined patch and it's in
Right.
upland.
Right, especially where it's small now.
We're not talking about in entering all of the wetlands here, but this isn't, as you said, it's on the upland, it's not in the wet areas, and it's a very concentrated protocol. It does not involve foliar spraying. So I would support it.
That's great. We'll come back with something for the next meeting.
Yeah.
So what about the, I mean, Bruce has a list of things about the behaviors of people that are living there. Like, no.
Oh, you mean the covenants?
Yeah, no salt, there's all these different things. Do we wanna go through each one of these, or do we wanna just hand this list to Mr. Cole?
Can it be addressed in the order conditions?
It can be.
Well,
I don't know if we have to talk about it or not. But
Do you want as a commission to discuss these additional possible conditions now or after we hear from the public? Specifically, we haven't heard from the public.
I would do it now.
Pardon me?
I would do it now.
So we get to the barriers. What do you think about the barrier idea?
Right.
Just go down the list.
I mean, the last time I gave my opinion on barriers, he nearly jumped out of his chair. But I'm not a big fan of giant rocks every 2 feet. But
Well,
it's,
I guess.
Build a rock wall in your yard.
I like Mr. Cole's proposal. It might be something that would become standard for developments. I guess it all depends on how big the bank account is. And that needs to be carefully considered. But I think that's always the problem with saying that you'll provide an inspection, is that when the inspection turns up something bad, what do you do next? So that the money would be there and available for any kind of rehabilitation sounds to me like a great idea.
the only problem is that rocks are very simple. You put them in place and they kind of sit there. And then you don't have to do anything else. They're very technologically simple and you don't have
But
to tar.
the difference is that you can jump the rocks. I mean, you can't jump it necessarily with heavy equipment, but you can jump the rocks with a weed whacker.
Yep.
You can jump the rocks with your possessions and spread them into the no disturb zone. And this, and since the buildings are going to essentially provide a good amount of physical protection to that no disturb zone. I don't know, having those funds available and having the inspection report every year. And I think the difference between what Bruce has talked about is when Bruce goes and finds a violation, he then has to make the landowner even recognize that there's a violation. Whereas here, you would think the violation, if it's by a professional, by a wetland scientist who's been approved by the commission, and they don't have necessarily any allegiance to anything but seeing if the conditions are still acceptable.
Yeah, I think that's good offer. I think that was good.
Bruce, did you want to chime in?
I just have questions. I think it's a good offer, and sometimes it's what's done with subdivisions and so forth. And there are some issues. The amount of money that's put into a bank account is an issue because is it a city bank account? Because if it's a city bank account that's in the name of the homeowners, the city has to manage that bank account and then pay the interest every year to the homeowners. If it's a homeowner bank account with a city name on it, the city can't take out those funds without the homeowner association voting in a majority to sign off on that. So
could make it inaccessible.
Yeah, that is escrow account information.
So there's escrow account information, and it's not as easy as you didn't do your inspection, we're taking the money. It's often you have to be notified that you didn't do your inspection, and then you have 30 days to do your inspection. After 30 days, if you didn't do your inspection, someone has to follow up and say, it's been 30 days, you haven't done your inspection. Now we're going to file for a release of funds. And in order for release of funds, you need certain signatures, you need, and so on and so forth. It's
Still takes management.
that's, I've always been a fan of just giant boulders, and those giant boulders are not going anywhere. I don't have to contact anyone to say, the giant boulder is still in your backyard. Is it yes or no? I know it's there because you can't move it without heavy equipment. That can't get through. So that's my opinion. Ultimately, it's your vote. It's just I'm just thinking of budget and staffing issues.
At Rocky Hill, the city is a co-signer on the account, so if it comes down to it, the city has the right to take the money without any signatures from anyone at Rocky Hill Co-housing.
Right. And then it becomes also political. We live in a political world. So who really wants to be the one to say to the homeowners association, we're taking your money and we're going out there and doing this work. And that means you have to replace that money. I'm just thinking real world application. Things are deeper than they look on the surface, and with the exception of a big boulder, which is not any deeper than it is on the surface. I mean, it's just a big boulder.
You own a big boulder
Doug, are you
course?
Yes.
I mean, what it clearly does, Bruce, is it indicates where the line is. But it doesn't necessarily stop somebody from doing something that's not supposed to be done on the other side. Yes, you can't get equipment in there, but all the things we've seen, like yard waste and people just going in and leaving a mess, it doesn't really stop them from doing that.
It doesn't, but the majority of violations are not just somebody throwing their yard waste in the back. That's going to happen, no matter what's there. The majority of violations are someone who increased their lawn 30 feet, and then their neighbor said, I'm going to increase my lawn 30 feet, and so on and so forth. And what the big boulder does is when Mass GIS does their flyover every 2 years, and they send us the pictures on Google Earth and Mass GIS, I can actually look at the picture and say, look, the big boulder's there and the lawn is on the other side of the big boulder. I mean, it's a 5-second, I don't even have to leave my office to do monitoring enforcement.
Well, but you're still stuck with the problem of what happens after you, if something's wrong in that condition, you still have the same condition. In this case,
that's what we have our
account.
ordinance for and our city ordinances, but I mean, the majority of the work is the inspection and following up on whether or not a report was submitted. And I mean, we have, and again, I'm not going to go much further on this, but I'll say we have hundreds of orders of conditions that have ongoing conditions and many of those say a report must be filed with the commission by October 1st of each year. That's the date that I picked when I started working with DPW and the stormwater manager. And October 1st came this year, and I had one report, and I'll say thank you to Northampton Plumbing. So there you go. And that's it. I mean, we just don't get them, and it takes time to follow up and write letters and say we didn't receive your report, and then someone says, well, that was the last manager that was here, and he didn't tell me that I was supposed to write a report, and then so on and so forth. It goes on. All right. That's my opinion of it.
All right, so that's a barrier question. And it's still open question.
I know, but should he keep going with developing? I mean, Bruce makes a good point. Rocks are pretty simple. It just is a delineation. Should the applicant keep going with developing a legal document?
I'm certainly going to try.
Oh, you're going to
Well,
try?
yeah, I mean,
Yes, I'm going to do the best I can.
Not having to do Bruce's job, I tend to be more optimistic about the capability of human nature to actually do what have people do what they say they're going to do. And so not that it's just a handshake, but if there's a binding, reliable method, I think we ought to listen to it.
Still apply to boulders.
Well, because in some ways, even if you have the boulders, you may still need a way to say, okay, but what happens when things are violated?
Right, and that's why we have our ordinance. Our ordinance deals with violations at that point. And so,
Well, that'll still be in place.
yeah, I think you're right, Kevin. I think the human nature is that people want to do the right thing. I think most of these people don't know. Do you read when's the last time you read your deed on your house and the attachments to it? It's a rare occasion, if ever.
Okay.
So what do people think? So
I go
Mr.
with
Cole,
boulders.
you go with boulders?
Yeah.
Boulders plus some binding.
Doug, what happens when we suggest is a kind of a compromise between what we have as a planted buffer and boulders? I mean, if we have to have boulders, can we kind of strategically place a bunch of them and maybe do a real thick planting buffer between some boulders so that it's not just a boulder every 4 feet like a row of untrained soldiers, but we can use the boulders as a landscape or design element in some places, like behind the units where it might even be a nice vista for the homeowner, and then use, basically take these plantings and really thicken them up and bunch them up in places so that makes it even a thicker barrier than what we've shown. And then we could add boulders, for instance, like, a cluster of boulders here, and then thicken up the plantings, and then maybe a cluster of boulders here in certain areas where it would really prevent the homeowners from extending their space beyond that line. But
Would there be room for wildlife movement through there?
of course, yeah, sure.
So they wouldn't be like right on top of each other, they'd be
Right.
clustered.
Well, they always have the opportunity to.
Does anything subject to a chainsaw satisfy your concern?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you could have a row of boulders behind that planting, just as it is, every
Well,
4
sure.
feet. Again, I go back to, my dad bought me a camping axe when I was 10, and certainly no boulders came flying down, but I'll tell you how, I took down a lot of trees. I mean,
Quite sentimental.
Then what happened?
Well, somehow I ended up
At the
here.
edge of the detention basin, because it goes up and then down, do you really need them there and there's a retaining wall behind some units? I mean, you should look at it logically, because there's some places that boulders actually don't make sense.
Yeah, you have a nice idea. No,
Sure.
I mean, I do want to say, I'd like to, I wasn't asking, I don't think I need a read on this now. I want to present you the best thing I can and see, if I can get 3 of you to go for it. I mean, I'm being honest about it. This is my sole spot where I just really can imagine that if I were living there, I just wouldn't want the things as they're described. And there's got to be a way where the issues, while nothing is foolproof, neither are the boulders, and I guess I'd like to make a presentation, that's thorough and thought out on the subject, and then you can decide, if approval is granted and we're dealing with conditions, then you can make a final decision and live with that.
Okay.
Want to take a look at the other common suggestions? So, no storage of snow in the wetlands, buffer zone, or stormwater control areas?
Yes.
Do you know where you're gonna put it?
Yes, in the triangular shaped area, to the left of the road.
This area is outside of the 100-foot buffer.
Well outside of it.
Is that enough room?
Yeah.
That's enough room for snow?
That's it. It's enough area, even abnormal year.
So you're gonna move snow from this parking lot all the way over to there?
There is no question that this site will require snow removal rather than just snow plowing.
But you're gonna plow some of it, when that gets
That's
too big, the
correct.
bucket loader comes in and brings it over to that spot. It's not
That's
like every
correct.
single time they're dragging snow from all over to over there.
What about the spot between the larger grass spot? I don't know. Right there, yeah.
There's some room there, but there's some parking, we've put parallel parking in front of it, so I didn't want to presume that I could get access to that
And it's the
area.
buffers.
And by the time you're putting it in a bucket and moving it, it just made sense to get it to the one area and level it out as best you could.
I think you can push them at the end of the road, that comes in straight. I think that's outside the buffer.
It's
Not
not
a
outside
lot,
the buffer.
but-
Yeah, it's right on,
It's
it's
in the
right
buffer.
at the edge, so.
Can I say something, Kevin?
Sure.
Personally, I would feel comfortable with snow storage inside the 100-foot in that area,
Okay.
if you needed it. And the reasons for that are if there's no salt allowed on the site, it would be sand, and you could put a small, whatever, dip in that area that's barely even noticeable by walking, and basically have it in the covenants to have it cleaned out every year or 2 years. And that would save snow being trucked wherever it's going. I mean, in Northampton, outside of Northampton, it seems like it would be best to be left on site, which would then there would potentially be some more infiltration and recharge to the wetland area, or yeah, that's my opinion. I prefer not to see trucks driving all around with frozen water.
Do you want to give me a different limit in terms of distance, like 75 feet from the wetlands
It's
to any
up to the
snow
commission,
pile?
but-
That would change the snow removal plan we'd set up, and we'd try to incorporate those spaces where we could.
If we're looking at that specific area, I have to say that we probably want to be able to pile snow up to within 50 feet of the wetlands in that location.
What?
But, I don't know if 50 foot's appropriate for the whole site,
But you already calculated snow volume from a typical winter and
Oh,
side,
sure.
and
Yep.
it will fit in that triangle.
As long as it
So-
doesn't snow 9 feet.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's actually quite a large area.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you go around now and look at where commercial establishments have plowed snow from parking lots, it piles up, a lot of it has melted off by this time. So you get another snow, it piles up a little bit more, melts off. It's not like an ever-growing mound all winter.
I would rather leave those common areas alone, so that they're actually, they don't become snow piles full of frozen, ice blocks for kids to fall down on, but they actually are gonna be greening up earlier in the year. So if you've done the calculations and it fits in the triangle, I'd rather keep it there, keep it outside the 100-foot buffer.
Doug's original plan to use that area for snow storage.
What do you think will happen to my backyard when all that snow melts in that triangle?
Well, it pitches back this way, so the melt-off's gonna naturally flow.
Across the road?
Not toward the backs of these properties, but toward,
condos?
well,
Towards
it's
the
gonna
condos?
flow onto this road and get caught, it'll go through the filtering, the drainage system, ultimately.
But it's not just the contour of the land that matters, but the contour of the pile of snow. And if it's a big pile of snow, that's on the south side and east side of Mrs. Fenton's,
I guess
of the hill
your
would be
guy's gonna
going
have
that
to
way.
take care not to push it onto the property,
I'm not sure what the question is.
the snow melting.
Turn it back to the snow melting back towards the neighbor.
And draining out to the property.
I don't want it draining into my backyard.
That's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
But snow, there's
because the soggy back
For
right
whatever
now.
reason, well, I'm sure you can address it with some grading mark.
Grading, make sure there's a, the backside of the snow pile would be graded, so.
Well, we can
Yeah,
regrade
we'll-
that a
we'll-
little bit so that
yeah,
there's
deal with
like
the
a
grading on the ground as well.
drop off at the back.
We're excavating that for the infiltration trench anyway.
There's no
Right,
question.
exactly.
We're disturbing area, so we can grade it.
We have enough cover over the top to change the grades.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think we can still do that without disrupting the infiltration trench.
Okay. Bruce, can you clarify with me, barrier along areas where wetlands or stormwater controls are adjacent to streets or sidewalks?
That's basically something we do for a lot of subdivisions so that snow eventually doesn't get pushed into the wetlands or stormwater controls, stormwater areas. So on the old plan, and I don't see as much on this plan, but you see where the rain garden is on the upper part there? Usually you put bollards in front of it so someone doesn't push snow into the rain garden. And then you never know what's in the snow, and then it clogs up the rain garden basically.
Now there's where we want some boulders.
Yeah.
The next item would be as a covenant to the condominium association that road salt and lawn chemicals should not be used. And that there would be an annual sign off by the homeowners association attesting to that.
By October 1st.
Next, annual inspection report of the do not disturb area, no disturb area, to be submitted to the commission.
Yeah,
So
we
that's
talked
what we
about that
discussed.
earlier.
Right. And then, this is the invasive item.
Which we've already addressed.
Which we talked about.
That they're asking for
Yeah,
5-year.
replacing riprap with materials that improve habitat value, better habitat values than riprap.
On the outlets of the outlet of the detention.
Right.
Right. We found that same thing. You have kids, they pick up rocks and throw them, and the riprap tends to slough. If you use some sort of green material, articulated concrete or something like that, it works a lot better. As far as I understand, well, at least since I started, the members on the commission have not approved riprap for, I think Cooley Dickinson was the only project and it didn't work.
What happened?
Well, for one, they put riprap in new places they weren't supposed to put lots of riprap, so we ended up with thousands of square feet instead of hundreds. And then two, some of it has washed down and over banks, and so.
Yeah, I mean,
It doesn't have to be articulated concrete. I mean, there are some geosynthetic mats that you put in there and plant them, and they get mowed right up there, right along with the detention basin. I mean, it's just an outlet.
It is a low flow outlet, it's not a high velocity area.
Right.
Flexible plastic stuff that grows right up there. I just goes up through.
Concrete's forever, and plastic does biodegrade over a period of time, and hopefully stabilize it by a point in time.
Right.
What could we, I mean, I'm just thinking riprap underneath something else perhaps?
Yeah, we've done
In
that.
case there was erosion, it would.
Basically what articulated concrete is, right? It's just bricks in the ground with grass growing up
Right,
through it, right?
that's.
Well, turf reinforcement has the last 20 years, I mean, by then you
Yeah.
have pretty stable.
You ever seen Bear Street Brook, the articulated concrete
Yeah.
in there?
Yeah. 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 There are some great projects in this town that some of the riprap has sloughed.
Okay. Next, all sidewalks and bike paths be constructed of pervious pavers or pervious pavement.
I guess when I wrote that, I really meant the sidewalks or bike paths that were located in the buffer zone or in the wetland. And they were the proposal during the last
there is a path in
The
the
revision was to move the path outside of the wetland and restore that wetland and actually put it into the buffer zone. I'm not sure where the commission sits on that.
Yeah, assuming, I'm dealing with the sidewalks we've got there, all of them are outside the 35-foot zone and and they would be done in typical materials, the same as the pavement and the rest of the project.
And are you anticipating that the planning board's going to ask for the bike path to be developed or at least formalized from?
Can't give you an answer on that right now, and we just ask that we approve it as is. If the planning board goes in that direction, I think frankly there's a certain process to the logic. The logic really involves getting a permit from the state to connect at the end of Northern Ave before you do anything, so I'm not sure how the planning board's going to respond to that.
Right. I guess the committee could take two different routes, and one would be to say whatever happens, happens. If the planning board requires some sort of formalized bike path through there, then maybe the applicant would have to come back for a separate notice of intent. Or the commission could say, yes, we would approve the bike path as shown on the plan with this material or of this size, and then if the planning board requires it, then it's already approved and in the plan. Either way, it doesn't really matter to me.
You know, again, this is one of these classic moments where the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board are heading in two different directions. And I'm not quite sure what to say.
Actually, what can you say until you hear from them?
Right.
Yeah.
Concerned about going into a permeable pavement without knowing exactly what that permeable pavement, if it's gonna be utilized for bikes, or permeable pavement scenario, you don't want brakes out there, they're slippery, you don't want permeable asphalt, it needs vacuuming and extremely expensive to build, it has to be on a correctly constructed subbase, and you are talking a 4-foot wide area, and the idea of permeable pavement is to let the water infiltrate and move 2 feet to one side and have the grass on either side. I'm a full believer in not paving any more of the road than we have to, but sometimes it's a little logical of what do you put in there for permeable pavement? You know, usually think of bricks or something like that, and that's not bicycle conducive.
Sure. I was kind of throwing it out there to see what options and open it for discussion with the commission, really.
There are a lot of geotextile mats or fabrics that could probably take bicycle traffic also. Again, you have to have a good foundation, but it's just usually not much more than a good gravel base.
Which is what you need under pavement in any event.
Just let it cook that. If they even put in a bike path.
I think it's better to.
Right, we don't know what the bike path is an issue yet.
Right, rather handle it separately.
And then Bruce's next suggestion was, could be above ground cisterns and rain barrels for some of the roof runoff. Be part of the larger storm management.
Well, it's in the stormwater management handbook, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept that you're infiltrating quite a bit of water, but to save some of that water to
Gardens and stuff.
Yeah, for gardens and lawns. It's always beneficial. I mean, the DPW is selling, each year they have a big event and they're selling rain barrels and cisterns and so they're kind of promoting that.
Cheap.
Yeah, I mean, you could have it so they actually have a system that the water comes down into a rain barrel off the roof, and once it's filled, it's bypassed into the infiltration trench, so you get a filled rain barrel. It's nice for lawns and so forth. I mean, there is some lawn there.
It's a good idea,
Quite a bit,
but
I mean.
wouldn't you let the individual owners decide whether they're gonna do that?
Well, I guess it depends on, I mean, you're looking at the site as a whole, so you're talking water management. Water management is probably the biggest issue here, right? And so if you can keep some of the water for later use, instead of, because what happens is, and Mark is right, the first flush is going to infiltrate, but after that, it's just going to wash through. Now, the rain, the 1 year rainstorm, there's gonna be some infiltration at the beginning of the storm, but the rest of it's gonna just pass through and sit in the detention pond for a bit and then get released.
It'd be an association bylaw.
Except that if you, all right, I guess I don't have this same optimistic view of human nature. Except if you outfit the whole place with rain barrels, that's great, but they have to be maintained. You have to drain them in the winter, otherwise they'll freeze and crack. Someone's going to hit them with a snow plow or something like that if they're close to, the garages. I'm just. Then you short circuit your whole system if you've got. I don't know. I don't know if this is for being too micromanaging.
I think we're just looking at it as a plus to the already
How many
calculated infiltration.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just questioning its practicability.
I think you're right, Paul. You put it on the individual units. What if you were to throw one underground, one large one underground, and it has a pump in it, and they pump and water the lawns? I'm just throwing it out there. It's all for discussion. So.
I would leave it more as a suggestion.
Right. Well, it's Northampton.
Well, I know, but
We
still,
should be
I don't
taking the
think we
lead
should.
on this.
I know. Well, okay.
If you have one, then how do you get all the rainwater to it?
Well, they've already got.
You pipe it there. You have the pipes.
Yeah, I just think that should be their discretion. But it's not up to me.
Cistern underground.
Or above
yeah.
ground.
The water table's pretty high already.
If you put it underground, Bruce, then it becomes another license that you have to get for.
Put it above ground. Build a tank inside of something that looks like a shed and water all the lawns with it. I mean, those lawns are going to get watered anyway.
Right.
And where's that water going to come from? Our filtration plant, right? And then you're actually taking more water from Williamsburg and putting it back into this local system. And I mean, so I don't want to be the person who says no watering of lawns.
Right.
I mean, that goes too far in my opinion.
Oh, it
But
does.
instead say, hey, water your lawn as much as you need, but
Using
do it with your
grey
local
water
water.
from
Do
Right,
it with
but
what
I
comes
don't
off
want to
your
be the
roof.
person that says you have to have an injection well license because you put something underground that's infiltrating. And it's another
I'm
state
throwing it out there
agency that
for
you have to
discussion,
go through.
so it's not my call.
Well, if you can think of a good way to do it, instituted, it'd be great. I don't have any bright ideas.
I guess my inclination is to think that there's probably a lot of aspects of the project that might be nice to have, and I don't know where our jurisdiction to urge their adoption. And this one is one where it seems like it comes up close to our jurisdiction. I'm not sure it's really.
Well, I think you're right, Kevin, but I think 85% of the lawn on the site is in the 100-foot buffer.
Right.
Or 75% of the lawn is in the 100-foot buffer. I mean, that is your jurisdiction. And what happens in there is basically your jurisdiction. And again, I'm not saying that this is how you have to go. I'm just saying that there's going to be water use, and that's going to be extra water that's taken in from somewhere else outside of this watershed. And how much extra, I don't know, but certainly I'm not going to be out there saying you need to shut off your sprinkler system while you're at work, but I certainly bike or drive by hundreds of homes on my way in that have their sprinkler systems on all day long in summer. In the rain.
Just pipe in that it's very easy to build cisterns into an existing foundation. You get huge quantities of water stored quite cheaply, but in this case with the high groundwater, it would have to be looked at more carefully. But certainly without the water table issue, it's very easy to do in a existing foundation. There's many people around the world that drink rainwater as a matter of course and wouldn't even think about drinking groundwater.
But that would preclude having a basement, right? These
Right.
these units don't have basements.
Yeah, so it's not a good situation.
Two on Northern Ave.
Sorry.
Okay. I threw them out. It's it's not just.
We could ask all these
For future.
guys here that are holding this map up to put their heads together. and just
Yeah,
say,
I would like to see at least, you show me that it's impossible, impracticable, and bad idea.
I don't think it's impossible.
I mean, not maybe impractical and a bad idea, that's going beyond impossible, but because, again, individual rain barrels, these common areas are not gonna be maintained by the property owners anyway. I assume that they'll do a landscaping contract with some company, but again, if these lawn areas are within the buffer zone and we're trying to make this, as good a project as we possibly can, I'd like to be satisfied that there was no way to use the rainwater for watering, so.
What if you had a cistern that looked like a big boulder?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Put it all out right on the 35
lists.
There's something very majestic about that.
They do amazing things with textured concrete these days.
Yeah.
And the kids could climb.
Climbing wall.
Yeah, they got those
There are
plastic rocks.
images of cisterns that look like boulders
Oh,
in the book Rainwater Harvesting for Dry Lands and Beyond.
Really?
Yeah, huge.
There you go.
There it is.
There it is.
Yeah. Right times, right.
Unless some kids drown.
And once they're full, they couldn't move the rocks.
There you go.
Doug, who controls how much those open space areas get watered? Would it be you as the,
That's a good
Property
question.
owner?
I never thought of it.
so there's also a thing.
Because I don't water, I
Yeah,
never.
Why does it have to be watered?
well, I don't think it does, I don't water, but,
Yeah,
and you may not have, you may find that maybe initially you have to get it going, but
I don't know, there's no mow grass, which really means you have to mow it very rarely. Is there something that's pretty drought tolerant? I mean, there are, let's put it this way, there are species of grass that can be planted that need far less water than other species. They may not be quite as nice a feel to the touch, but frankly, those kind of grasses tend to take a lot of fertilizer anyway, which is not going to be permitted here. So you might as well plant on something that's a little bit more rough around the edges. So we'll look at it, and we'll look at that issue as well, the species of grass that's planted.
That might be
That might be an easier way to do it.
do it. There are plenty of turf species that need no watering. They may die in a 100-year drought, but
But they live every year routinely.
so, yeah. I don't understand the concept of watering lawns. That's just me.
No, I don't.
Neither do I.
Yeah, but it gets done. There's no.
No, but you could have a covenant also, right? If you don't,
Yeah.
right, no one's gonna water it by hand with a hose. Or drag a
I
sprinkler.
mean, you could put a covenant that said no watering except under drought conditions. And that's a covenant that I'd be prepared to live with.
But then in drought conditions, you
That's
don't
usually
water,
when they
because
don't
there'll be
like
no watering. There'll be no watering order, so you won't be able to water it. So,
That's
this is water.
correct.
Yeah, I'd be satisfied with that. I thought that might be asking for too much.
No, my gut is that people who tend to live in downtown Northampton, these kind of developments don't need perfectly manicured lawns. And, that's just not part of the appeal.
It turns golden. It becomes an active, and it turns golden in the sun. Yeah. Like California.
You know, we've used alternative grasses at the co-housing project, and so I'm familiar with some of the things that are out there. We can look a little further and see what we can find.
Bruce's last suggestion, street sweeping requirements. What do you think? 2 to 4 times a year.
I just put that in there because if there's no salt, there might be a lot of sand. And so I'm not sure if it's less expensive, but probably it's less expensive for the homeowners to sweep the streets 2 to 4 times than it is for them to clean out the detention basin and the storm scepter and the hooded sumps and so forth. So this is just looking out for everybody. Yeah, the DPW may require it more often in their suggestions, so.
It's flat. A 15-mile-an-hour zone, it's flat.
It's a private street?
There's not going to be any.
It's a private way in there, right?
I don't believe you're going to need much of anything. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, maybe that's the case. Maybe there isn't any sand needed, but. So.
Okay.
So if there's snowplow.
Other discussion, comments from the commission? Comments from the public? Yes, can you state your name so that we can...
My name is Joan Fenton, I live at 164 North Street. I was just curious as to how much property will be taken to widen the road and add a sidewalk to View Avenue. How much on either side?
Question, you mean,
You're going to widen View Avenue for two-way traffic?
the answer is that the current width of View Avenue would be suitable in and of itself. The issue is whether or not the planning board is going to require us to put a sidewalk there in addition to the paved area that's there now. We would personally prefer not to put a sidewalk there, but I don't know if we're going to ultimately be able to decide that.
But two-way traffic cannot go by now with parking. If an oil truck comes in, they can't go by.
I'll leave that up to the planning board to decide whether that way is wide enough. But there were no plans. Our plans, as shown, don't show View Avenue being widened except
Oh, I thought
right
it showed
at
a
the
sidewalk or something.
It showed
over
a
the edge of the
sidewalk,
road.
yeah.
But that's not a wetlands issue.
Right, we try to restrict our comments and questions here to the purview of the commission.
Go to planning.
Yeah, okay.
Other comments or questions?
Alan Seawald, I'm counsel for the North Street Neighborhood Group. I'm not going to repeat my comments of last time about how difficult it is going to be to monitor all these things I heard down the road. You're not going to get compliance 20 years from now, and you're going to get just as many reports 20 years from now when there are twice as many projects that are supposed to report. Just a review of the stormwater plan. Given how shallow the dry wells are, ought to be some plan for overflow from those dry wells, because there's no overflow plan at all. Just a question.
Can we address that?
I thought that they were going to sheet flow.
They are. If they exceed capacity, then you have overland flow as if they weren't there, so.
Okay.
But they're for recharge, that's what they're for. And when they're recharging, as it reaches capacity, then they will drain as a typical downspout.
And in the area with 2 units, there's no plan for stormwater off of the parking lot and the roadway up there. And I understand, and I did speak to Mark earlier about that he's looking at this as a whole project, but ought there be, in your discretion, some plan for stormwater coming off of the road and parking lot in the around the 2 units?
Yeah. Again, looking at the project, we look at, evaluate the entire project to make sure we are compliant with the TSS removal and stormwater management attenuation recharge, which we have for the entire project. We are providing recharge from a dry well for that house, and the water that comes off of that driveway does travel overland flow. It does get some treatment. It doesn't get that particular drop of water, does not get 100% 80% removal, but that's not a requirement that every drop of water be treated. The requirement is that the project have an 80% removal for the site. So yes, maybe a drop of water on that driveway technically does not meet it, but in reality it does meet the requirements. And the project as a whole does comply with DEP requirements.
Which of course doesn't mean that you can't require some more to be done up there. The last general topic I wanted to just put out there, I think that needs some discussion. I don't know what there's been, I didn't hear any discussion at all about construction management at the time the construction takes place and what requirements you'll have for the construction period. I know that there's a stormwater pollution prevention plan required by EPA that DEP suggests that cities and towns apply, and I think it would be a good idea here, given how much is it, so close to the wetlands.
They have to submit one to DPW prior to getting their stormwater permit.
Okay, so that will be submitted?
Yes.
Okay.
Attorney Haskin?
The draft one has been generated.
I haven't seen it.
It's in the stormwater report from November 11th.
Okay. That's all sort of technical stuff. I just reiterate one more time that this is way too much, way too close, and you do have the discretion to pull it back even farther and make it much less dense and, really have a neighborhood of homes where you're not squeezing in little green spaces. It just still seems like too much running off, too much collecting into basins, and you have the discretion to pull it back even further out of the from the wetlands within 100 feet, and I would urge you to do that.
Any other comments?
Yes. John O'Niger, I spoke with you all last month from Regenerative Design Group in Greenfield, and I have a few different points to bring up. I think the broad piece is that the commission is tasked with protecting the wetlands, and the question that you have to ask is whether this proposed project does in any way alter the wetlands and the physical aspects, the chemical aspects, or the biological aspects. And I think it does. I think it's a very dense development. It's very close, pushed in, even though it's been pushed back a little bit. I've taken the liberty of doing a little view of the property with basically the buildings, driveways, and pathways marked in dark, and so it really draws out where the development is. And looking at the density of this development, you can see the green is the wetland line, the gray is the 35-foot line that's everything has been pushed back to. The yellow line is the 100-foot buffer the commission has jurisdiction over, and so within the 100-foot, there are 8 of the units are completely within the buffer. That includes the 2 over here, and I think it's 14 of the units are partially within the buffer zone. And the area that's not completely developed, either with buildings, walkways, parking, is also intensely impacted. This will grass, though we can call it grass here. It's not going to be infiltrating completely. It's going to be disturbed as well. These very small little green areas that have been mentioned. So there's a lot. This is a lot for this very small space. Let's see. So let's see. So I wanted to bring up the water question, and this portion of the property over here that has the spruces is approximately an acre, and I think the effects of the removal of that woodland has not been completely looked at and understood. and how the water level the groundwater level might change within this area and how it's going to affect the surrounding homes. Done some initial calculations of the potential effects. I'd like to submit this to the Commission, the potential effects of the Norway spruce removal, estimating the water that they're removing, and estimating in 1 acre of woodland, it's approximately 410,000 gallons through the year that's being removed, with a potential change in the water table in this local area of 2.5 to 3.4 feet. These are rough calculations, not based on, I'm not a hydrogeologist. We're using some papers that I've cited here on this area that we're beginning to understand more of biodrainage and the uptake of these trees. So I'd like to submit that for your review. And that also relates to, again, the issue that I don't think has been dealt with completely here is the bottom of the basin at 89 feet. The current elevation is 90 feet with the water table was 28 inches below that. That's 88 feet 4 inches. That's 8 inches below the proposed elevation of the bottom of this basin. So the groundwater is very, very close to the bottom of this basin. The infiltration that is going to happen there is minimal. So I think that could be problematic as well. Yeah, again, I think this is just too much shoehorned in. The discussion that's happening around the stones, the discussions happening around the snow and where it's going to go is really indicative of the design that the design is pushed so close up to the edge of the wetland and this 35-foot buffer line. There's no space for there to be yards for anywhere for these families to be. The only place for them to go is into this 35-foot line. I think you've got to be kidding yourself if you think you're going to be able to police it with the number of issues that are going to be written into the agreements, the homeowner association agreements. It's the policing of that is going to be impossible, and the only place for them to move is back into this wetland zone. So I think that's problematic, and so the same thing with the snow. These small little pocket green spaces, there just really isn't enough room for the people to live here, and they're eventually going to be moving into that buffer zone. They'll be cutting down these trees with whatever axes they get when they're little boys. And I'd also like to just note, I know this isn't your issue, but it's indicative of the squeezing of this, but I don't believe the parking down here works. There's no turnaround space for these end slots, and these slots close in, the turn can't be made by an incoming car. So that needs to be looked at as well. So I don't think there's space for what is being proposed here.
I'm sorry, who do you represent?
I'm with Regenerative Design Group. I'm working with the Neighborhood Association.
I'm assuming that's a transpiration number. You're giving us the 410,000 gallons.
Yes.
Is that species specific, or
what are you no, it's not. It's more generalized than that. We weren't able to get a specific number for the species.
Is it even conifer versus deciduous? Or?
No, it's lumped together. Again, I think the citation there has the mentions that there's no. We had thought that there'd be higher numbers for conifers, and it turns out, at least for this spruce, there isn't. So it's lumped together.
Okay, so that's I'll read the paper. Thanks.
Can I ask a quick question about the paper? It says that the removal would translate to a water table elevation of 2.5 to 3.4 feet, depending on soil porosity and hydrological dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying the water table would raise 2.3 to 3.4 feet across the entire site?
Well, no, we're looking at this area, the approximate 1 acre in this corner of property where the spruces are. It's really hard to know what's exactly going to happen when those trees are removed. They're fully mature spruces that are pumping a lot of water out of the ground. So the effects, the changes on the hydrogeology of this corner could be dramatic, is I think what we're saying here. It's hard to know. I'm not a hydrogeologist, so this is done with a quick review of some papers, some quick calculations. So I mean, the guess is that it would be most dramatic here and with unknown effects outside of that area.
Okay, I'm just trying to, the water table's at 28 inches, or seasonal height estimated water is at 28 inches below. This would put water above ground.
Yes.
That's what you're anticipating?
Yes, I'm anticipating the
entire acre will become swamp?
That the groundwater level will rise within this area.
Above the ground.
Above the current level that it's at right now.
Right,
It's
2.20.
It's 28 inches below.
Right, so I mean, I'm trying to,
Yep.
I'm just trying to,
Yeah, exactly.
I think
Yeah,
it's
28.
interesting, I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, what is it saying? It's saying that the
A
groundwater
couple inches water.
The groundwater will be above the ground.
above the surface,
And
where it is
above.
right now. This surface here is 90 feet. The house is built at 92 feet right there. This is proposed, a detention basin is proposed that the water will come up very close to these corner homes anyways. So if there is any change in that groundwater level, it could be problematic for those homes in the corner, as well as changing the hydrology for these homes around here. If there's a rise in 6 inches or 12 inches or the 2-foot potential.
I have a question on whether and how that would affect the wetlands. I was looking at Almer Huntley's 1965 topo of this, and none of the trees around the house at the end of View Avenue were shown. The tree line actually looks like it's the hardwood tree line, the native species. If you look at the USGS topo map, the brook is actually shown as a perennial stream. Early on, there was a finding or showing that it was no longer perennial. Could the removal of the trees necessarily, does it always mean, you're talking about problems with the residences, but as far as the conditions of the wetlands, do they necessarily get worse for removal of the trees? I mean, removing water from wetlands is normally considered a bad thing.
Right. It's complicated because there's lots of different factors as to why these conditions have changed. Sedimentation, change in species, all the development around it. So there's this cascade effect that's happening. The trees are having a big effect. The change in the vegetation is seasonally changing. As they come on in the spring and start pumping up water, they're lowering the water table locally and drawing water out of the ground. As trees are removing, there's more water. Being removed, there's more water in the ground. So yes, the vegetation changes could have had a large effect here.
Because the condition of the ground floor and the basements of those units is something that Mr. Cole has to deal with, but I'm more worried about in terms of the wetlands. Is this necessarily going to have a deleterious effect on wetlands? I mean, it seems that's how you're presenting this to me.
Well,
I just want to be clear about what the potential effects of
the
altering
deleterious effects of the removal of the trees are the changes in the hydrology around here. The deleterious effect to the wetland are the loss of habitat, the loss of that upland area where vernal pool species or wetland species are coming into the upland here. So that's a negative to the wetland here. All the species that currently right now are coming out of the wetland and using any sort of upland areas, this will all be lost to them. So it is true that having more water in the wetland could be a positive as well.
Brian Windmiller, Highly Ecological Services. So I'm here at the behest of Adam Cohen of North Street Association. And at first, I just wanted to commend Mr. Cole and the commission. I think you've done a good job in pulling back some of the development, and it's quite different than the initial proposal. Nonetheless, as just pointed out, there is a tremendous amount of development proposed quite close to the wetlands, and I've spent a lot of time. I'm primarily a wildlife ecologist. I've spent a lot of time looking at the effects of habitat alteration, particularly the removal of upland forest on amphibians and reptiles. And as you know, I think those effects extend way beyond 35 feet, way beyond 100 feet. In fact, in your own, in the city's ordinance, you acknowledge this, saying a growing body of research evidence suggests that even no disturbance areas reaching 100 feet from wetlands may be insufficient to protect many important wetland resource characteristics. And you cite problems with nutrient runoff, erosion, siltation, loss of groundwater recharge, poor water quality, vegetation change, harm to wildlife habitat are greatly exacerbated by activities within 100 feet of wetland. And as pointed out very well in the schematic, a very large percentage of the current habitat area, much of it forested under existing conditions, within 100 feet of the wetlands, would be removed and turned either into houses, asphalt, or lawn, essentially non-habitat. And as I went over in the letter that I submitted to the commission, there's a tremendous amount of evidence, I was just touching on it, about all of the kinds of effects that are projected beyond the edge of the development. So as you know, just because the edge of grading is at 35 feet, that's not where ecological effects stop. The ecological effects of that newly created edge will project way beyond that. And I guess I just have some questions relative to the ordinance and the interpretation. If I understand it correctly, so you then go on after having stated that in the preamble, you say certain areas 50 to 100 feet from wetlands may be suitable for temporary, limited, or permanent disturbance as appropriate, and you then give the condition about allowing the alteration of up to 20% of that area within the 50 to 100, so this is the 50 to 100 foot zone, or up to 2,000 square feet on a lot with cluster subdivision. Am I interpreting right that applies still here? Because it would seem to, from my reading.
You read section B, 33710B.
Yes.
It says the performance standards over and above state law, with the exception of setback requirements in Table 1, which is located below the section you're reading, are hereby waived. So that section that you're reading is waived. Everything's waived except for that table which says 35 feet or 10 feet with.
Well, no, because you stipulate. I'll leave that to people who have. I'm not a lawyer, so if you're saying that stipulation is waived, I think it would at least be
in this zone, in
the 50 to 100 foot zone. I think it would at least be
used in this city zone.
URB. Right, in URB. Yeah. No, I understood that, although. Okay, so that it would still be of use to the commission, so you can refer to this because you're essentially setting precedent, as you know, with new regulation language in your ordinance. So I think it would be useful to the commission, if you don't already have that, to simply get a table of you now have various setback zones. You've got your 0 to 35 foot zone, and essentially there's little disturbance now under the current proposal. You've got your 35 to 50 foot zone. So encroachment down to 35 feet in the urban residential B, and then you've got your 50 to 100 foot zone, which you comment on in your ordinance. And I think it would just be useful for you to take a look at what percentage of existing buffer zone on the site within those zones is being altered in the 35 to 50 foot zone, and the 50 to 100.
I actually did this on my plan, and almost all of the, I think very few of the structures are within, even corners of them, within 50 feet. I mean, some of the walls, some of the wood walls, the most significant disturbance is the detention basin.
Between 35 and 50 feet, but you have a huge amount of grading. So this is disturbance. It's not, so what I'm saying, I'm just saying for you, because again, your general, as you say here, and as you say in your pre-existing policy statement that predated this, your policy statement as of 2003 was generally to try and maintain 50 feet. So how much of that 35 foot to 50 foot zone is actually being altered? It's quite a large percentage. And I think this would be useful for you as you decide on this case, because this, again, you're setting up, as I read the language, this is not an urban residential B. You don't say you're automatically entitled to any work within up to the 35-foot buffer zone. Instead, you say you condition that, and you say above the table that you were just referring to, you say that projects in certain infill areas in accordance with the table where development includes mitigation measures that will improve the existing condition of the wetlands or adjacent upland areas. So I guess I would just ask the question, this is the first meeting that I've been to, so I can only rely on what I've heard from Adam, but how exactly does this project improve the values of the wetland or adjacent upland areas? If you are permitting then that going from 50 feet down to 35 feet, and I would say that the 35 to 50 foot zone, a very large percent of it would be altered, how is this project improving the existing conditions?
There had been some discussion at length with Attorney Seawald about whether or not that interpretation of that section of the law is accurate. I don't want to, state that. I think I've heard from, is it you, Downey, who, I'm not sure who said what on the commission. It's been too many meetings and too long. But there was what got expressed back was that the bylaw should be seen in its whole context, and that there was some question as to whether that referred to the 35 to 50 or whether you referenced that table. And what came back was you were to reference that table. But regardless of that, what we are doing to improve the buffer zone is to remove invasives in the buffer zone and to replant with species of higher wildlife habitat value, especially in and along the 35-foot zone, which is closest to the wetlands. So that's the answer, and that was the way it was presented at the time.
Yeah, I would just note, I think I did submit, again, comments before this ordinance was adopted about this particular clause, because at best it's extremely confusingly written. And I think a common sense reading of that would indicate that this is, in effect, that this is a standard that you are requiring in order to go to those Table 1, those maximized setbacks, that you need this improvement. And whereas, Mr. Cole, you would be removing some of the exotics within the area. Of course, you're going to be removing a lot of the exotics, because a lot of it is going to be, is going to be pavement, it's going to be house, or it's going to be lawn. So you're going to be removing, all those exotics except for the grass you plant in that area. The disturbance it's hard to, again, I think, conclude that removing a huge amount of forest in the buffer zone, even if you then go beyond the edge of your work somewhat and remove, if you can get rid of some of the Japanese knotwood patches. And by the way, there's another big Japanese knotwood patch around here too that wasn't talked about.
It extends actually onto the adjoining property.
That's right, exactly. Which also raises the question about I'll get to that in a second. But so even if you do succeeded in getting rid of those other Japanese knotweed patches and you remove some of the multiflora rose, and you can successfully do that, say from 35 feet down to the edge of the wetland, wherever you and the commission agree to do that, it's hard to conclude that that's an improvement to the adjacent uplands when the great majority of adjacent uplands has now been changed from forest under existing conditions to asphalt or house or lawn. So again, there is this lack of clarity, I think, in the ordinance as drafted. But to the extent that that is a condition, and again, I've read a lot of regulation language. I think a plain reading of this would suggest that it is in effect as a condition that you're supposed to be doing some kind of compensatory improvement. It's hard as an ecologist for me to see that as an improvement. Regarding the specific issues of exotic plant removal, because I think I addressed that, the Japanese knotweed removal, I think as you suggest, most of the issues, the very severe issues that have been researched with Roundup rodeo, most of the toxicity is related to the surfactants or the adjuvants. So if you're doing small-scale patches like that and directly applying straight glyphosate, my own as an ecologist is, I'd say go for it. But in terms of if you're thinking that, if you're considering somehow the removal of some more stems of multiflora rose in the site, as you know, I mean, just in a quick walkthrough, it's loaded with exotics, as you would expect, because the area has been disturbed extensively in the past. So it's not only loaded with multiflora rose, but it's loaded with bush honeysuckles, it's loaded with oriental bittersweet, it's loaded with black locust. So even if you remove some of those stems, from the 35-foot zone down to the edge of the wetland, you've now created exactly the conditions that favor the establishment of more and denser populations of those species, because those are all species. When you walk into the wetlands, as Adam and I did just a few hours ago, you walk into the wetlands rather quickly once you get into the woods and once you get past the area where fill has been brought in the past and the soil has obviously been disturbed, and you get into red maples, you get into oaks, the density of multiflora rose, the density of bush honeysuckle, they all drop off very quickly. And that's a finding that, if you walk around anywhere in the state, you'll notice again. You go near the edge, and that's where you find, or the edge of disturbed areas, where you find the exotics. That whole area is rife. The soils in there are just loaded with seeds of multiflora rose, of honeysuckle, of oriental bittersweet. And you've got tons of birds that'll very happily, carry those seeds in for you too. So by now, taking, like here in the south where you've got dense Norway spruce that shade the ground very effectively, that let very little light through, and you consequently have very few invasives for the most part in that densely wooded patch. Now you're going to take forest that covers this whole area and you're going to push it all the way back here. So now you're putting all that much more light, all that much more exposure to edge right over here, and obviously you're going to get new populations of multiflora rose and of bush honeysuckle and of oriental bittersweet creeping in closer to the wetlands and into the wetlands themselves. So, the comments in a nutshell are simply, is this appropriate? And this is, I've been on a conservation commission. I well understand that your authority is limited and your discretion and buffer zone is limited, but is this the scale of development this close to the wetland that you feel is appropriate? And is this in concert with past projects that you've allowed and ones that you want to allow in the future? So it's more of a question than a comment. Thank you.
I just want to direct question, Mr. Wingler. Given that almost any development disturbance within that 100-foot buffer is going to have a negative ecological effect, how would you guide the commission? Is it, when we revised the wetlands ordinance, we had scientific evidence provided of wetland species migrating a quarter mile, okay, from wetlands. So clearly, the 100-foot line was conveniently chosen, but ecologically does not work so well. So, no, I'm asking Mr. Wimmerle a question. I'd like to have his response to how would you change this plan to maintain the resource area?
What I think the reason I particularly bring this up is because, again, you're dealing with new ordinance language. So as I understand it, prior to last fall, you were working under your written 2000 October or something 2003 policy, which was less complicated. You've now introduced some more complexity with this table and with what seem to be criteria or conditions that apply for you to use the table. And I guess you need to decide whether your interpretation of this ordinance is such that it says, okay, as long as you stay in URB, as long as you're not encroaching beyond the 35 feet, you can do whatever you want and eliminate pretty much all of the buffer zone up to 35 feet, which is, that's more or less what's being proposed. This is a fairly maximalist proposal adhering to that 35-foot line. Or do you take whatever you want to call it, a more conservative from the perspective of conservation perspective that says no, even projects in URB are not automatically entitled to consume all of the area up to all of the buffer zone up to 35 feet, and that in some areas where clearly any reasonable development of the project would require some intrusion, that's one thing, but it doesn't mean allowing the maximization of that. That's your call. And again, having been on a conservation commission, I well understand that you need to balance many things in making that. But this is particularly important because this is the first time, I believe, that you're acting on a project that is now seeking to work particularly under this new ordinance environment. And so what you decide here will set a precedent. And since this is what Mr. Cole is proposing, is maximizing, is going to use almost all of that buffer zone up to 35 feet. If you permit that, it seems like, within URB, URC, whatever, you're then acknowledging that that's the standard, that you can, sort of develop everything right up to that 35-foot line.
Would you modify the plant? I noticed that most of the planting plan seems to be shrubs and lower understory woodland species. Would you modify that planting plan to provide more large trees that would provide more shade in that area?
Yeah, ideally, I think that would be better. Obviously, as you know, it sounds just from listening, it sounds like you've got a great deal of experience in plant ecology. The trees would provide more structure in various ways. They also provide more buffering to the wetland edge beyond it. But if you're going to allow the houses are very close to that 35-foot edge in some cases. So, that's just a practical matter. If you were to approve this plan as is, I think, like some of the other discussion, you need to then, at least thinking for myself, again, when I was conservation commissioner, people aren't going to want to have big mature trees, pushing up against the back window of their homes necessarily. So, it's a balance.
Just a response, perhaps. First of all, there are other portions of the site that are not developed if you're looking at the percentage of impact as a whole on the buffer zone. We've got about half the map here, and it winds up around to the Northern Avenue land. But it certainly is intensive within the 35 to 100 zone here. I think if you also look at the map, you will see that we have made a solid effort to move impervious surface outside that 100-foot zone, move units there, move roadways there, really try to take advantage of as much room as we could that was outside of the buffer zone. The other thing I'd like to ask, and I guess this is probably well beyond any regulatory framework here, is really, and perhaps even addressing it to Mr. Woodmiller, is in the broader picture of things, what is the alternative here? The alternative is for me to go build, let's say, 25 houses in the other parts of town where the line is drawn at 50 feet. And I do want to say, and really to some degree in the other parts of town, the line is drawn at 100 feet. And that's what that 20% proposal was meant to apply to. There was a clear legislative intent when they drew up this bylaw to separate the URB and URC from the outlying portions of town. And that's something which I think we've all bought into on some level. How that affects the regulatory environment is a different question, but certainly on some level we did. So I ask you as an ecologist, build me 25 houses in not even a sprawl development, even a limited cluster development in a rural section of town. And I would argue that the impact there, in the broadest sense of the word, is greater. That while you are allowing development closer to a wetland here, there are a variety of environmental benefits from developing infill that have a positive impact. And those, at least from that broader point of view, need to be taken into account.
We have time for one or two more comments? Excuse me. Back.
Sorry, Lisa Maloney, 170 North Street, and if this gentleman doesn't mind, I'm going to refer to his map that he nicely brought in. I have a question for the board. One question anyways is that I know one of the 8 tasks, I think it might have been 8 of them, that Kevin and you all are here to protect is wildlife, and yet this is like the 4th or 5th meeting and I really haven't heard the word wildlife mentioned until just now. With the exception of the prior meeting when Paul mentioned it for the group before us. But I'll try to be really quick. I'm just going to give you a little, some little tidbits of information. Basically, this is a wetland, and basically, and although people's finances are really not a part of this, this was not, this purchased property was not sold as buildable lots. He bought just the house for maybe like $340,000, and that was it. There was no extra charge for 5 point whatever acres. So everybody knows it's a wetland. The realtors knew it was a wetland. The assessors knew it was a wetland. This yellow line here that this gentleman nicely brought out for us, that's the 100-foot buffer. So had you stayed with the state regulation of not letting people build within the 100-foot buffer, we're maybe talking about, I don't know, guessing 1 or 2, 3 houses that he could maybe could build.
The state doesn't regulate the 100-foot. It provides you have to file for a permit within the 100-foot.
Right, but I mean
similar to the city, so the city can't be less stringent than the state.
Right, but you could go, well, okay. So anyways, so you're talking about maybe 3 single-family houses versus an extra 20 condos. I live on this lot here, and so what he didn't talk about earlier when asked about the density question, each of these, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots here. Each of these lots have a house up front, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all these backyards have been free, which for the wildlife has been great because not only did they have this, but they had our backyards too. So I'm sure I probably won't see them now that there would be 75 people in here. So one question is, I was just, with the exception of Paul in his last meeting, asking about how the lighting of the prior project would affect the wildlife. I haven't heard you guys mention wildlife at all, so I just wondered, how is it that you protect the wildlife? Well, in the initial, if you had gone to 100, you were protecting their space, but we gave it to human habitat, which is fine, and so that's going to push it back here. And then I was a little wondering how you're not going to protect it again with a fine standard weather boulders or maybe large trees to keep the people out of this wetland as well. And just for a point of reference for people who don't know, first this is north, and then this is the underpass near Dunkin' Donuts, and then it parallels King here. So this is Stop and Shop and all the businesses here. So how, if you're not going to put a secure boulder line or something, how are you going to keep those people from coming through here? Of course, if you cut the trees down now, I guess it might be very wet, so that would stop that. And then I just had a follow-up question for Mr. Cole's group. Is this just an open area of water? The detention, does it have a cover?
It doesn't
Is it just
hold
open?
water except in storms.
Well, December 12th, we had a 2-day rain, and I got a lot of water in my basement. So when it is holding water,
There's no cover on it, no.
there's no cover. So what's the dimensions of that?
Of the detention basin?
Yeah.
I couldn't give you that. So. I have to scale it off on the
How many
plan.
units are the 5 units at the bottom?
Again, it depends on, I mean, I think what you tell us is 15,000 cubic feet. The main best way to describe it is 15,000 cubic feet of storage, of which I think 13,000 is in the basement and 2,000 is in the pipes that are attached to the basin. Is that about right?
More or less, yeah, 4,000.
4,000 in the pipes, so it's 11,000? Okay.
So I'm sorry, the detention basin itself is an open area, yeah?
Yeah.
Are you
And,
asking how deep it is?
oh, no, I just wondered if there was a cover on it. Like to
No,
keep-
there is not.
There's been, incidents of across the country kids drowning. I was just wondering but to the board, I just wondered in general what happens to that wildlife as they keep receding and receding and receding back? Are they the deers that we eventually see on 91 that are roadkill? I mean, how do you protect the wildlife? Nobody has any answer.
We have to take a lot of things into consideration when we finally do make a decision about
Because that's a
this.
wildlife
And
corridor.
wildlife habitat is one of those elements, along with the.
I'm not sure who determined it to be a wildlife corridor.
Somebody on your board and some of the, I forgot his name, but there some of the documentation from when you were doing work in the industrial park.
I'm just
Brody, maybe?
I'm just trying to think of bigger picture. You have the Route 91 to the east. You have the industrial park to the north. Stop and Shop and Dunkin' Donuts to the west, and then your house and neighborhood and downtown. I just find it difficult to believe that it's a wildlife corridor per se.
Oh, then then why do I see all the deer?
That doesn't mean it's a corridor.
Yes, there
Well,
are
I got it. No, I
wildlife
said it that
everywhere.
way because I read it in the documentation that it was a corridor.
I guess
you have wildlife there,
I haven't
doesn't
seen
Right.
that it's a. I guess I haven't seen it written or on
Oh, okay.
maps or anything that says it's a wildlife corridor. I may be wrong.
I mean, I had read that.
Mr. Windmiller's a wildlife.
And then I've seen a lot of
expert. I'm
wildlife and
not.
I get them in my backyard, so I figure they're coming and going from somewhere and using that avenue. So.
Yeah, that's a
I met deer
possibility.
in my yard.
Sure, there are deer. Maybe it is a wildlife corridor. I'm just trying to figure out who designated it as a wildlife corridor and where that came from. Just for the record.
Yeah, I
or-
have that on my computer. I can send it to you. Maybe I misread it, but I did read
believe it
one of
was
the
John Bodie.
documentations.
Oh, okay, because, I'm just looking at what's available to me. The Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program hasn't determined it to have priority habitat or estimated habitat. I haven't seen a wildlife study that shows this parcel or area as a wildlife corridor.
Okay, well, maybe
Trying to
somebody
get it.
misstated and that's what I read, but I did read it in the...
Has there been a wildlife
Minutes.
study? Maybe there needs to be a closer look at that.
That's a possibility too. I guess there are 7 or 10 acres of woodland there between the neighborhoods and the industrial park, Stop and Shop, Dunkin' Donuts, downtown, and Route 91 and the river. So it's possible that 7 to 10 acres is a wildlife corridor.
There was an amphibian study.
There was an amphibian study that
Didn't find anything.
Yeah, this last winter, somehow luck wasn't on our side. It didn't show what we see, but I just wanted to make sure that I just want to make sure that, as a neighbor, I'd rather not leave people crossing through that back area to an honor system that somehow the association checks every year. I'm on the side of Bruce with boulders and a strict border to keep people out of there.
Thank you. We have time. Mason, you want to say something?
Yeah, just as a clarification, the Wetlands Act speaks to protecting the habitat, not the species per se. In other words, we're not there to save every deer that walks through someone's backyard, but we are there to save the deer's habitat if it falls within an area of our jurisdiction?
Let me just pipe in since this question was raised. One of the unintended consequences of this kind of buffer zone encroachment, it's well understood, is that what you tend to do, the best browse for the urban deer that are using this area is along the stream. And as development encroaches more and more, the deer get funneled into a narrower area. So their density obviously increases, the density of their browse increases. And there's been a really good recent paper on the synergy between deer browse and the establishment of invasive species, especially Alearia garlic mustard and Microstegium, Japanese stilt grass, which is a really devastating invasive that if it's not here yet, will be very soon. It's already well established in a lot of southern Massachusetts. So when deer browse an area very heavily, they tend to create conditions that allow the domination by those two species, and it makes for a very stable and difficult to change community structure.
Time for one more comment, Mr. Cohen.
Yes, I'm Adam Cohen. For me, the bottom line scientifically is I've presented to scientific studies which say that buffers that are less than 50 feet are generally ineffective at protecting wetlands. And so the new wetlands ordinance, as it's currently being interpreted and applied here, I feel is scientifically unsound in URB. I haven't heard anything to rebut that so far. I have a specific question, a couple points that John raised that I want to expand on. My understanding is the state requires the bottom of this basin to be 2 feet above seasonal high water. And test pit 4 says that groundwater is 28 inches under here. That's about 90 feet elevation. Bottom of this is at 89. I don't get to 10 feet. So I would like to be reassured that this is a proper detention basin, because my concern is what you're going to get is that you'll have long periods of stagnant standing water. It won't handle peak stormwater flows very well, and it will become a major mosquito breeding resource in our neighborhood. And I've circulated papers to you on that effect, and I have copies of them here as well. Another point, that we've raised for some time, and to my knowledge has not yet been addressed at all, I think one of your responsibilities is flood control. We know, 1999, in this area, there's a flood damage report right about here, Tropical Storm Floyd. I'd like to know more about that. What happened there, and why, during the next rainstorm of similar size, are you not going to get more flood damage reports on all this area, which is lower than that, than Aveview Avenue? So it needs to be addressed. So far, I don't think it's been addressed at all. So to that end, this is the 2004 flood mitigation plan that appears in, and that called out the particular part refers to that area. I'm concerned to hear that herbicide is still on the table. We have several papers here which talk about various risks of glyphosate. One scientist recommends that application of glyphosate be kept 30 feet away from woody plants, from the trees. I think that's going to be very difficult to do here. So other articles are presented to suggest that for both Japanese knotweed and multiflora rose that biological control, natural predators, is more likely to be the ultimate, more sustainable solution to this than herbicide applications. So I don't think removal of a limited number of invasives with herbicide techniques is much of an improvement. I don't think it's going to last very long. And in the scale of decades, it's really not going to have much additional positive impact than essentially letting nature take its course. So papers on that. Speaking about the trees and water uptake, this is a paper, Role and Function of Forest Buffers in Chesapeake Bay Basin, Non-Point Source Management. Mature forest can absorb as much as 14 times more water than equivalent area of grass. Presumably a lot more than hardscape and paved surface. So that speaks to Jono's point. I think you might be adding more water to the wetlands, but I think now you're introducing increased safety issues with flooding in those condo units that are adjacent to the wetland. You've seen the test pits, you know where seasonal high water is now. There's very little room for error there.
So I think that's an issue that really needs to be explored at greater depth out of concern for the homeowners who might buy these units, separate issue from the wetlands themselves. Here are a couple papers. This is mosquito control practices near wetlands, and this is an article on how certainly this wetland area, the woods have been disturbed, but they can get a lot worse. And there's a lot of case studies in here about how certain stormwater mitigation schemes, detention ponds, when they don't work well, when they fill up with stagnant water, Carlin Drive is a good example, but they can breed mosquitoes. They can look very ugly, filled with algae. I'm very concerned that that's what's going to happen here because it's just not. It's not in specification for what the state likes to see for these things. But I hope you take that seriously because it's going to introduce a nuisance and a health hazard to the neighborhood and also might seriously tempt these people to start applying insecticides and other things to control the mosquitoes, which are already pretty severe in this area if you've ever walked through here in the summer. And this kind of disturbance, I'm concerned, is going to make it just that much worse. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Mr. Arnold would like to just comment on the...
Sure. Very quickly on a couple of the items. One was the detention basin, the fact that there may be less than 2 feet of separation between the bottom of the basin and groundwater. That's a requirement if you're going to utilize the basin as a recharge or an infiltration basin. That is not the function as it will actually recharge some groundwater. We're not taking credit for it because it does not comply with the state requirements for a recharge basin. It is a strictly detention basin for stormwater attenuation. It essentially has a drain at the bottom. There will not be stagnant water in there. It will fill up during rainstorms, but there's a hole in the bottom and it will totally drain between storms, so there will not be standing water at that location. Flood control, when you have a hurricane, you exceed a 100-year storm or whatever, you're going to have flooding. This project has been designed according to criteria to attenuate and control flooding as per state and town regulations. So we have addressed the fact that this project will have no net negative impact downgrading from this site for flood control. And depth of groundwater keeps being brought up a lot about this project, and we're only 18 inches down. That was in one of the test beds. You look through test beds throughout there. The depth of groundwater varies throughout, and up in the higher elevations where the buildings are, the groundwater is much deeper. There's not groundwater 18 inches below these foundations of these buildings. That's just in the lower areas. And we did, show them there, and we are making sure that our proposed stormwater systems are above those groundwater elevations. Just a quick clarification.
Mr. Chair, can I make a suggestion? I mean, since the general policy is 50 feet, wouldn't it be appropriate to ask the applicant to bring everything back to 50 feet just to see what it looks like, to see what development could be done here at the 50-foot line? As a constitutional matter, obviously, Mr. Cole's entitled to some development here that reasonably returns his investment. You're not obligated to allow him to make as much money or develop this as densely as he pleases. You do have that jurisdiction, and what would be the harm of bringing back a plan at 50 feet just to see what it looks like? Planning boards do this all the time with cluster subdivisions and regular subdivisions. We see two plans all the time.
Would you still be interested in that if it were less dense than the surrounding neighborhood? Or is it just this area in particular? I'm just wondering if a quick study were done and it was shown that it's less dense than, let's say,
But the rest of the neighborhood isn't sitting in the buffer zone.
most of the area.
This is sitting in the buffer zone. This is all sitting in the buffer zone.
Right,
But the rest of the neighborhood isn't.
But what you're
And
saying,
so-
you didn't relate it to a wetland issue, so I'm trying to figure out whether it's a density issue
No, I
or
did
it's
relate
a
it because
wetland
your
issue.
ordinance has a general policy of 50 feet, no disturbance. Let's see what 50 feet, no disturbance looks like.
No, it doesn't.
But that's explicitly,
But however, even though it doesn't have a general 50-foot buffer, I'm just asking how that would make a difference to the wetland. And if there's a good case for that, then I think that's a
The
fair.
city's general policy is no encroachment within 50 feet of wetlands,
Right, that
period.
section is waived and.
It is waived, but you don't have to waive it. It can be waived, but you have jurisdiction up to 100
It says
feet.
this section is waived. It says right here.
But you, as
Except
Downey
for the
said the first
setbacks,
time I
this
came
section
here,
is
Downey
waived.
said, why am I arguing about 35 feet? Take it to 100 feet because we have jurisdiction up to 100 feet.
You
have the jurisdiction
You're
to
right.
move it back to 50 feet. And all I'm saying is, let's see what it looks like. Let's see what development Mr. Cole gets at 50 feet. That's all I'm asking.
I'm trying to run with this. What would be the difference on the wetland? Would it be a stormwater issue? I mean, let's say you have the same density, the same number of units at 50 feet, would there be a difference in how much stormwater
But
goes
you're not
to
going
the
to have
wetland?
the same number of units at 50 feet.
I'm
Because
not sure. What
It's
if
all of those
what if you
issues.
stack them
It's
up
all
and
of
build
the
them higher?
It's all of the issues.
Build them
It's-
wider, put less driveways in and more units.
Let's see what they look like. All I'm saying is let's see what they look
I'm
like.
just asking what would be the impact on the
Well,
wetland?
why do you have a 50-foot general no-build zone in Northampton at 50 feet? Why do you have that?
We don't, that's.
There would be less encroachment by the people living there.
That's right.
They wouldn't be pushing to get beyond the
What is that
boulders.
encroachment that's going to impact the wetland? The commission can only make a decision
Keep it
on
pushing
what
into the
adversely impacts a wetland. They can't make a decision as to, there may be more people who walk in the backyards and then trample a wetland. That's not something a commission can say. A commission can say, you have not shown that your stormwater is meeting the standards of both the state law and the local law. What's happening is here, the commission has to make a decision based on the Wetlands Protection Act and the Northampton Wetlands Ordinance.
And so the point you're making is that the 50 feet doesn't make a difference. And you waive or have the ability to waive, and again, we're circling back to the first meeting because your ordinance is completely ambiguous and internally inconsistent. So to the extent that this city draws the general line at 50 feet, there is a general policy that 50 feet is the line, and you have the ability to waive down to 35, and you have the ability to waive down to 10 in certain situations. All I'm saying is, this is the general policy of our city. So let's see what the development looks like at the general policy of our city, and whether Mr. Cole is getting a reasonable return on his investment, which is the constitutional limitation, which I think you'll remember, Bruce, that he's allowed to.
I certainly know it, I took your class.
I know you did. I
I do know that. What I'm saying is that the section that states the city's general policy is waived, is not to be read when dealing with URB. Yes, you're right, there's a 100-foot jurisdiction, but the general policy applies to the rural residential, the suburban residential, and the URA areas.
And I believe you have the ability to pull that back. And all I'm saying
You're
is.
100% right. The commission has full ability.
So
However,
let's see what it looks like. All I'm saying is see
it
what
has
it
to
looks
be
like.
shown
And if the commission
that
likes.
there's no adverse the commission can't say it has to be at 90 feet because we think 90 feet is better than 30 feet. The commission has to show that there would be an impact, and that's what I'm saying. What would be the impact of moving it less? Would there be fewer impacts, or would
I
it not? It hasn't been Mr. Weller's.
If I may, I'd really like to.
Please do.
I've watched the deliberations of this commission, not closely, but I know what people are being given in terms of permits. You have been very consistent about the limits shown in the table. You have made, I can't think of the exception you've made. I'm sure you must have made one somewhere since the ordinance has gone into effect a year and a half ago, but I can't put my fingertips on it. So in the end, I guess I should have looked at that and known that 10 feet was probably out of the question. That said, there was a huge amount of public hearing around the issue of 35 versus 50, and I mean it's all over the tapes of the meetings of the city council, at the ordinance committee, at this commission. That was a discussion topic. There's no question about what the legislative intent was, and I think we all need to take the temperature down a little bit. I, as an applicant, do not want to go back to the drawing board a third time with a project that's at 50 feet solely for the purposes of presenting a red herring. That's on us.
And other commissioners may feel differently, but I think we have to judge the application on its merits as best we can, and not do a bunch of what-ifs and try to help the applicant redesign an alternative plan. I think you've been working and taking seriously the feedback to try and make adjustments in your original plan, and when we get to a point of making a decision, I think we're having to decide on a plan you want to present. I'm not trying to tell you what plan you should present, that's not our job.
Just for the record, Mr. Young, you seem to be suggesting that there'd be no difference in the ability of the buffer zone
I
to
don't want to have
protect.
this discussion here. I'm not interested in that, so.
We are
This is
interested.
a public comment.
Yes.
Yes, well, I'm not on the commission,
It's
so.
the question you're asking.
What you're saying needs to be interpreted.
Well, I'm
Let's-
not going to interpret. How does that sound?
Mr.
I'm not on
Windmill,
the commission, and I don't need questions asked to. I was stating what I believe our ordinance, the legal intent was, and what was passed through numerous educational trainings and public hearings and council hearings and special subcommittee hearings, and that's, I'm stating what I was there to witness and believe, and what was put into this document that this commission is going to be making a decision on. And that's the end of that discussion. I'm not going to answer
Right. I think that
my intent from someone else.
I had said that our public comment period was completed. We can't just go on endlessly. I can assure everybody, I've lived in Northampton for 30-odd years and happened to be away for a couple of years living out of state when this all got developed, so I don't know the history, and I can say that, yeah, there's a lot of language that I find hard to interpret, and we are quite aware of this as a commission, that when we make a decision on this case, it's going to be precedent-setting, and it's something that we have to consider very carefully. We are trying to do as thoughtful a job as we can in coming to a reasoned decision that we can live with and that the community can live with. That's, I think, proper for Bruce as a resource to the commission to express an opinion. And it's up to the commissioners what we do with that opinion, just as it is what we do with everybody else's opinions that we hear. So I think at this point it's appropriate to determine that I'm assuming, because we need stormwater reports and other material that is not yet available before we can have a proper discussion to decide whether or not and under what conditions we might allow approval, that we need to not close this hearing and go into our discussion to consider motions, but rather to continue. Is that fair representation?
Do I have a question?
One last, but we can't, we've been on this 2.5 hours. Sir?
My name's Lawrence Tatro. I live at 188 Bridge Street, Northampton. My wife and I own property up on North Ave on the corner of View and North. And I'd like to speak on one item. I spoke here at the last meeting. I don't want to go tracking all over and redo everything. But one thing that really concerns me, among many things, but one personal thing, because I think it's going to end up costing me some money, and that's why we're thinking about it. And I'd like to speak for myself and possibly Mrs. Fenton, who lives on the other corner of View Avenue North, and maybe Adam Cohn.
Sir, please limit your remarks to things having to do with the Wetlands Act or the Wetlands Ordinance.
It's to the tree removal.
Okay.
Okay. We are directly going to be affected because we are right south of these mature growth Norway conifers. And I do believe what he said, when these things are removed, they suck up an awful lot of water. And I brought this up at the last meeting, that I have dampness in my cellar now. you're gonna build homes, I understand, Mr. Cole, they're gonna be on platforms. We existing families that circumvent this area, we have basements. And I've got a furnace going in there all the time, and usually in anybody else's home, I suppose this time of year, the cellar's nice and dry, it should be with the heat in there. I have damp places, 4 places on that floor, in that cellar now. So I am definitely concerned because of the water table, and with these trees not being there and doing their job, I know we're gonna have more water problems. I'm really concerned about that. And I know it's been brought up at the last meeting, the water, the land, the lay of the land, it floats backwards. The water table's there. Nobody's disturbed the land that you're proposing to develop at the moment. And I'm sure there's gonna be raising and lowering of the land, or wherever you're gonna build, flattening it out. But I think we're still gonna have water problems. I think a good indicator of that, if you would drive down North Street today, you know, anytime this week, there's water underneath that street too. That pavement has been heaving up, and there's more holes in it, and dips and gullies. The water is there. And if this water table rises with removal of those mature trees, and the development and the paving and everything else, we don't have to go through the whole business, that we are definitely, families that circumvent or surround that, we're going to have some more problems that are going to be really detrimental to us and the value of our property. If I may make one other little statement, Mr. Young, I believe it is, right? Okay, he wanted to know where the wildlife went. This is just a little thing. I used to go to work early in the morning. I'd be out there, and say on King Street, 5 in the morning, whatnot. And he wanted to know how these animals, the deer, how they got in there. He related to all the things that surround this property. A lot of those deer, and I saw 2 this spring, come down off Barrett Street. And they crossed King Street. And this was 10:15 in the morning, 2 of them, over and back between the cement plant and the East Ham Savings Bank. Over the tracks into the woods. They come all the way down from Meadowbrook and Florence, come right where the bike path is there. And that's where these are coming from. They come up off the back of Straw Avenue and High Street in Florence. They come down, that's where they come from. I just thought I'd just like give you that.
I think it's very interesting, right?
Yep. Thank you.
Any other comments? Motion to continue, Bruce?
Can I just ask, since you're leaving this discussion and asking for stormwater standards or calculations to be done, and
Well, there's a whole range of things.
and asking the applicant to go through this, which to me makes sense to have him go through DPW first, because they'll spend the time to make sure that the stormwater meets all the standards, federal, state, and local. I'm wondering if the committee should, if the committee's uncomfortable with this or is comfortable with this, should that be stated so that all of this work isn't done ahead of time and then changed after the next Conservation Commission meeting? With the actual plan itself.
If we're really thinking that we're not going to grant it, why bother with all the work?
Right, why bother making the applicant go through all of the process of getting the stormwater permit, which then would have to be changed and amended, and you'd have to go through it again, going through the stormwater pollution prevention plan, applying to the EPA, etc.
I think at some point we're stuck with that. We have to get it. I kind of assumed that I wanted to get a sense of where things were, but I didn't expect to. I mean, obviously you can't make a decision without all the information in front of you. So I'm willing to take that risk,
So
I guess.
because it's sort of framing a hypothetical.
Yes.
If we're pretty sure we cannot imagine a circumstance where it would be possible to say yes,
right,
then we should let you know so you can not waste your time.
That's what I believe.
I'm not there. I can imagine circumstances where, given the legal tools and the responsibilities that we have, that I can imagine a situation where we would say some version of yes to some version of the project. I'm not ready to say that I can't see us getting there. Anybody else?
It's sort of ironic, but one of the things that bothers me the most is the complicatedness of the covenant, because I really, that just bothers me a lot. And it's true that one reason you have to make it so complicated is because wedging a lot of things in there. But I don't know that, yeah, anyway, that's because I don't have that optimism about human nature. That's not you.
I don't want to open a can of worms. I don't have the NOI in front of me. But was there anything in there that addressed the history of the fill and previous disturbance to the swell?
There's the history of we believe that whatever happened there happened in the around 1980. The neighbors have commented to confirm that in various shapes and forms. I've heard it's Market Street that got rebuilt, and part of what came up got put there. And I believe I've also heard that it was King Street from other people. Market.
Why? What's your point?
Well, were all these neighbors there when it was first disturbed?
Meant somewhere.
Okay. I mean, all the homes that are there now?
We have aerial photos that show what it was like at different points. So that gives us some sense of a timeline.
I just kind of wanted a history of the site's disturbance, because it seems that disturbance of the site is coming back again. So why wasn't there a hue and cry back
There was.
then? Okay. Well, this is what I don't know.
When the fill was put there?
There were neighbors, I am told, that called and complained.
Okay. Thank you. I just wasn't familiar with the site.
We have the laws and the rules and the standards that we have now to work with, and they weren't in place.
Oh, no.
Clearly, a lot of what exists wouldn't be allowed
Right.
if we were going by today's rules. We can't do anything about that.
I wouldn't be living in my house if we had today's wetlands in it.
Danny?
I guess I'm considering the question of the buffer zone and the marginal benefit of the extension of the buffer zone. Mr. Cole has already pulled this project back, reduced its footprint significantly. And Mr. Wimlow, that was the aim of my question to you, was that as an ecologist, if someone made you king of Massachusetts and said, what is the best ecological buffer zone for wetlands, I don't think you'd arrive at 100 feet.
That's correct.
That's correct. There's no species that uses upland and uses wetland that limits itself to 100 feet that I heard.
That's correct.
When the wetlands ordinance was under consideration. So what I still leave open to you to present to me is that 15 feet will make all the difference. Or that in this case, since so much of the project is already outside of 50 feet, that grading between 35 and 50 will make all the difference in terms of my jurisdiction over this area.
Are you, because I know public comments have been closed, are you addressing a question to me?
It's being continued to next meeting. So, again, this is, I have not, I have more papers to read, more evidence to consider. I can look at the blueprint again and see, and I can go back and walk the site and see what's within 35 to 50 feet. Because again, my impression of walking the site is that, yes, there are mature Norway spruce in the southern half of the site. But as you go north, that you end up on areas of lawn, which I don't think of as excellent upland habitat, and then an area of piles of debris that are heavily, and then some trees which are covered with bittersweet. And in fact, some of them have been topped because they've been laden with bittersweet. So again, in terms of the benefit of preserving that upland habitat, it has to be significant. Again, the ordinance says that the preservation has to be reasonable. So it's not absolute. It needs to be reasonable. So, and I think it also can't be ignored that that this infill project does have some ecological benefit in terms of reducing trip distance and reducing, automobile trips to downtown. Many will argue about the ultimate balance, but I can't completely ignore them in terms of considering the project. That's where I sit right now.
Any other comments by the commissioner?
Adding to the neighborhood.
What?
How many more cars are you adding to the neighborhood?
That's not our purview.
Oh, well, but he brought it up.
Given
Cars per
American,
family,
given American households,
Two.
yeah,
Two,
two per.
at least.
And if the project was built somewhere else, 2 per.
Or 3.
Doesn't mean it's right.
Well, the difference is in terms of mileage driven. Right, if I have to get a loaf of bread and I live on North Farms Road, I can ride my bike, but if it's raining, I'll probably climb my car. A person in this development has better access to the bike path than I do, and far better walking access to downtown. I'm not saying that's dispositive, I'm just saying that I cannot ignore it. I cannot pretend that, I can't pretend the benefit doesn't exist.
But your decision's not going to be based on.
We can't.
No. Well, no, because the
I'm talking about the wetlands and the wildlife. Right?
And the car itself on the
You're supposed to be protecting that, not Mr. Cole's interest.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, good, because I was getting a little confused.
We're not concerned with whether Mr. Cole makes money or loses money. We need to make that perfectly clear. That's come up a couple times tonight, and that's not what this is about.
Any other comments by the commissioners before we ask for a motion for continuance? No?
Move to continue.
Mason has moved to continue. What's the date we would continue to?
Bruce?
What's the date?
March 12th? Yes, March 12th at 6 p.m. Actually, the Smith College project is being scheduled for 5:45, so do you want to make it 6:15? 6:15, okay. In this room?
Okay, do I have a motion? Can we get a second? Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted.